All right, we are back. The Fantasy Football Summit is live once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming back. Really appreciate y'all coming. Having a great time so far. The first 2 nights, first 2 days, great time with some great guests. If you missed, purchase the package, watch replays on at your leisure over and over as much as you want. You saw Jeff Ratcliffe, Mike Valverde, Jen Ryan, myself, John Lobb. Yesterday we have Mike Dempsey, Mike Beers. Mike Clay, great segment with Matt Waldman as well. Brad Cruz on auctions. Curtis Patrick on Dynasty. Alex McCarthy on Dynasty. And Jake Seeley and Joe PCP closing out with the big night. We think we have another big night for you because we do. We don't just take it. And we've got Evan Tarciano from Football Diehards is going to start the night talking about a little in-season management tonight. Then we're going to go to Dr. Roto from Scout Fantasy, Hussein the Brain from the Fantasy Couch. We'll have Brandon Marianne Lee from Fantasy Alarm. Emil Cadillac talking his stomp theory. And by the way, thanks to Emil for putting this all together once again. Can't say that enough. And Gary Davenport. I know you've all been waiting for IDP happiness, and Gary Davenport will bring it in big time. So I don't want to hold up and cut into too much of Evan's time. This is Evan Tarciano from Football Diehards. Evan, you're here to talk in-season management and all that kind of fun stuff. So, sir, the floor is yours. I'll be standing by as needed.
Sure thing. Well, first and foremost, welcome to everybody. Thank you very much for joining in. It's a pleasure to be aboard, and once again, thank you to Emil for setting this whole thing up, and to Bob for helping me out here. So if you guys have any questions during the broadcast, Bob's going to be my cohort in crime over here. Feel free to ask them away, and I'm sure Bob can let me know as they appear. Otherwise, I mean, we had a lot of stuff to talk about. First off, quick introduction about myself. If you don't know who the heck I am, I'm one of the senior writers over at footballdiehards.com. I do a little bit of editing work over there as well. Been with the staff since the beginning of the 2016 season. I do the Crystal Ball article, do a Facebook chat and all that fun stuff. So if you haven't checked me out in the past, feel free to hit me up. And on to in-season management, which I guess is my forte. I'll be dead honest. Look, I'm not a daily player. I primarily play in season-long leagues, so a lot of times when I get these questions on Twitter and on my Facebook feed saying, the price of this guy this week on XYZ site is blankety blank blank, I just, look, to me it's all Greek. I don't have the time for that, but season-long content is where I'm at, and especially when it comes to in-season management. What the heck is in-season management anyway? Well, it's pretty much anything outside the draft. It's going to be 90-something% of your entire season. And, of course, in my opinion, it's the most important. All the football diehards, we always preach about how important it is to go into the draft as prepared as possible. Go ahead and make your pre-built rankings. Go ahead and have a strategy going in, but be adaptable. We talk about all this, and look, that's all the draft stuff. Once you exit the draft, hopefully you have a pretty good idea of where you fall compared to the remainder of your league. Those of us that play in the mom and pop style leagues, the friends and family formats, which I'm sure that the majority of us do, it's great. Some of us might play in a little bit more competitive formats, a little more cookies on the line, as it were. Those are obviously going to be a little bit more cutthroat. But look, in-season management is going to come down a handful of points. Lineup construction. Waiver wire is obviously a big thing that we talk about week in, week out. Majority of articles on the site that you're going to see have to deal with waiver wire pickups, who to get, why these guys are becoming relevant, etc. Making trades, identifying some future targets, some guys maybe just to kind of put on your watch list, on your flag list. How to deal with bye weeks. And the last thing I wanted to just quickly talk about was how to stream kickers and defenses. So a lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of it's just going to be kind of high-level overview. I'll try and give my tips and tricks when I can. I've been doing fantasy sports for, I don't even know, nearly 20 years at this point, so I might be dating myself in my gray hair. I'm getting like Bob, but I haven't lost it all quite yet. But just starting off with lineup construction. So like I said, you should have a pretty good idea of where you stand. Where's your team strong? Where's your team weak? The second that the fantasy football season starts, I get bombarded with trade questions, and sometimes before the league even starts. I'm sure Bob's the same way. I'm getting trade questions before week one. You don't need to necessarily make a trade right this second, but I know that a lot of us are under this mindset of, well, fantasy baseball is this really, really long season, and, the marathon, not a sprint adage that they keep on throwing out there. Just take a look and take a deep breath first, though. Take a look at your lineup. You might be weak at wide receiver. You might be weak at running back. You might be strong at quarterback. Who knows how exactly you drafted your team? A lot of us as a whole, especially this season, know which positions are a little bit deeper than others. We know that wide receiver's deep. We know that quarterback's deep. We know that we can wait on those positions. We know that a lot of people are going to be drafting running backs, especially in PPR formats, pretty early. We know that tight ends are a bit of a crapshoot when it comes to outside of the top handful of guys. Kickers and defenses, I'll talk about that later, but for the most part, I don't sweat it. I'm pretty sure I speak for the vast majority of experts here that if you are in some wacky points league that rewards crazy points for interceptions and return touchdowns and all that, then that's one thing, but I just pretty safely ignore it. But take a look at your roster when you get out of the draft. Where exactly do you think that you can improve? And is this a league that you've been in for a decade or two? Is this a league you might have just joined? I know, as an example, in my home league, I have players that I play with. I love them to death, but the second that the draft is over, they have to take a look at their team. They get all freaked out about the draft report card from whatever website they play on and say, oh, well, blankety blank site said I got a D in my draft this year. That must mean I just have a terrible team. Well, don't overreact. Take a breath. Let it sink in for a minute. You don't have to make trades right away, but it never hurts to start preparing from the get-go. Knowing kind of where you stand, knowing where, again, those strengths and weaknesses lie, that's kind of a key thing, especially as it gets to be trading. Waiver wire pickups and trades are obviously going to be the big two ways that you can either add to your team throughout the course of the season. You can augment your team, but for the most part, your team should really be in place. I always tell people that the trades and the waiver wire, they're really meant to supplement your team. They're not meant to be a complete and total restart button overhaul. It's great to pick up some guys throughout the course of the season that might be able to help you. Certainly there are going to be waiver wire pickups that will provide dividends for you. Good return on investment, especially earlier on in the year. It's where a lot of your big point getters might come from. But don't go crazy. Don't go crazy about it. The biggest thing to do in season, and this is going to be for everything, it's really 2 words: be active, be informed. No matter where you get the information from, whether it's TV, SiriusXM, Twitter feed from any of our experts here, Facebook, wherever, even if you have just a smartphone and an app, get the information constantly. The quicker you're able to obtain it, the quicker you're able to adapt to it, the better off you're going to be, obviously, in the long run. Any league that you aren't active in, you're basically just blowing off money. If you have to take a hiatus or whatever, that's fine, I suppose, but be active, especially when it comes to trades, especially when it comes to each and every week taking a look at the way that you stand as opposed to the remainder of the teams in your league. It's too short of a season just to not be able to focus on things like that. I usually just spend 5-10 minutes at the end of each evening just taking a look at the latest news and notes, flipping throughout the course of the day. Obviously, what Bob and I do really makes us immersed in everything. But now that the games occur on Thursdays, sometimes Saturdays, Sundays, Mondays, football happens so much now, and there's really no off season anymore between free agency and the draft and the combine and everything else. The football doesn't stop. That's why we call ourselves the diehards, because we cover things all year round. Some of you might not be like that. Some of you might just be like, the second the Super Bowl is over and done with, maybe you just switch to fantasy baseball mode or whatever. Maybe just don't care about sports until football comes around again. Who knows? Bob's like, what the heck's baseball? But there are other sports. Maybe hockey or basketball might be your thing. But look, I just would recommend strongly just stay informed. It's a really simple concept. It sounds really stupid. You're like, well, this is no duh tip, but spend time with it every single day, every single night, even if it's only for 5 or 10 minutes. And again, just stay on top of things. Don't overreact. That's a big tip. Knee-jerk reactions, I find, hurt more than help. Way more often. You might have drafted a sleeper pick that all of us were touting in the beginning, and he's appearing in magazines and radio content, and we keep on saying that his physical prowess is going to get him into the lineup, and maybe the coaching staff doesn't see it that way week 1. or week 2. But eventually, a lot of these waiver wire guys, you might just kind of, again, flag them a little bit, keep an eye on them. Don't cut your guys too early. I think is another thing that I get a lot of questions on. Dropping a top 5 player to given position, a top 5 round selection in exchange for this week's flavor of the week. Projections, I think, on sites are obviously a bit skewed sometimes, depending upon your format, whether it's PPR, non-PPR, depending upon what website you play on. Projections, I feel like everybody's a slave to them. You want to have your lineup set to the maximum projections possible, and then, hey, my win rate now is 52-48 instead of 50-50, and I might take it home instead. Just go with your gut. I think is a big thing. Trust yourself and don't overreact. Again, basic fundamental things, and they sound really stupid, but the more you just come to trust yourself and your particular analysis, the better off you're going to be. Plenty of times I've had a wide receiver that has 1 or 2 catches and no touchdowns a couple weeks in a row. And doesn't it always seem like that following week when we say, well, the heck with this guy, I'm done with him, then he has that six catch, 2 touchdown type week. Just stay consistent. A lot of the rosters that I have come to draft over the years aren't really boom or bust. They're a little bit more predictable, I guess you could say, in terms of their projected outputs every single week. I don't typically go for those Devery Henderson-esque type people where they might have 3 catches for 3 touchdowns in a given week. I try to get guys that just are solid production, maybe boring, might rely on veterans a little bit more than most, but I just like to have somewhat of predictability for my roster. Another note I have here, look, a lot of these waiver wire players that tend to break out and give you the most amount of return on investment, you get those early in the season. I know I alluded to that before, especially with running backs due to the nature of the position, due to how frequently these guys get hurt, to a lesser degree wide receivers. But take a look at some of the players that essentially were unowned coming out of the drafts last season. Evan Ingram, Deshaun Watson, Greg Zuerlein, Robbie Anderson, Jaguars defense, Carson Wentz, Alvin Kamara. I mean, a lot of these guys, the earlier that you were able to obtain them, even if it wasn't their big breakout week, the better off you are. So again, just being active, going back there, flagging a couple guys that you might actually like. I know that we talk all the time. Okay, so you've left the draft. Now it's week 1. Now it's week 3. Now it's week 5. You know what? I still have an entire stack of players that no one else has drafted. It might be the backup running back, and that's fine. Just again, know your teams, know depth. The better prepared you're going to be, the better off you are. So that way, look, if an injury occurs, you don't have to worry about, who's going to pick it up this week? Is it this a guy that has soft hands and is a third down back? Is it a bruiser? This particular player was hurt, so who's going to be his immediate replacement? Having all that set aside, having just maybe a quick list, 5, 10, 15 guys that you think are prime breakout candidates this year in advance, way super duper sleepers, pencil them in. Just go ahead and keep an eye on them. News and notes, especially throughout the course of training camps, throughout the course of the preseason. I think that I like to view it like as a hard knocks viewpoint. Each and every year, the more exposure that certain teams get during the preseason, whether it comes to hard knocks as an example, or just how nationally televised all these preseason games are now, the more of an overreaction you are. I remember that in one season, and Bob might be able to remind me of which particular year it was, Chris Johnson had this amazing preseason game. He had some 80-something yard rushing touchdown in the second or third preseason, and everybody was like, oh, well, Chris Johnson, a couple years after this whole CJ2K thing, but maybe still has plenty left in the tank. And I succumbed to it. I fell to it. I ended up drafting him just based upon really one play. And I was like, well, if he could do this in this preseason, maybe he can hold up. Maybe he can actually surprise the coaching staff. Again, limit the knee-jerk reactions. Take the careers as a whole. Every single year we kind of crap on players that are old, that might not have the whole stigma of being the sexy pick this year. I mean, Bob, how many years in a row have we said, is this the year of the demise of Larry Fitzgerald?
Right, right. That and look, I mean, preseason. If we're looking at preseason, Evan. I mean, I go back to the ultimate preseason superstar, Travis Jerby, who averaged 10 yards a carry over the course of his career in the preseason, only to disappear when game plans come into play and pure speed is no longer enough to fuel the fire.
So look, certain players are going to have the ability to transition. I mean, we know that. A Hall of Fame caliber talent, and he might be the outlier here. But don't necessarily always succumb to the sexy picks. Don't come out of the draft and take a look at your team and it's all upside and no guarantee. You don't necessarily want to do that. Again, mixing and matching is a big thing that I like to do. Have some upside, certainly. You don't want to have a team that's capped in terms of its ceiling, but keep an eye on these steady, boring type players that may or may not walk into some production. Big thing that I always get questions about, and it's a big sticking point for some of my articles here is FAB or waiver wires and how exactly should you treat them when it gets to be during the middle of the season. How much should you bid on FAB? Well, kind of the bad answer is that unfortunately everybody's league is a little bit different. Some people work on $1,000 pool, some people work on $100 pool. Some people have extremely aggressive owners that they're in their league. Some people just don't pay attention at all. I think obviously because every league is different, it's hard for me to say that player ABC is now going to have a role because the guy in front of him got hurt. So if you spend $5 this week, you're guaranteed to get him. It doesn't work that way, folks. That's why in my articles, I generally speaking try to give a percentage as opposed to a flat amount. I would strongly encourage, if there are any commissioners that are out there that have not already switched to a FAB-based system, to do so. I don't really like the waiver wire system much. I get why it's in place, certainly, and look, certain people can benefit from it, I'm sure. But when it comes to FAB, I really like the ability for everybody to have a fair shot at these players. In terms of how aggressive to be, the earlier in the season and the longer the role that the player will inherit, obviously the more aggressive you want to be. Some high stakes leagues, you're going to see people bidding, 40, 50% of their total FAB budget on one guy. But that might be a payoff for them. That might be their guaranteed RB3 or their flex player from that point moving forward. So, FAB, again, it's difficult to predict. I think another thing about FAB is, as I mentioned before, depending upon the total pool of FAB, the higher the pool, usually the less aggressive you necessarily have to be. If it's $1,000, some people are like, well, it's $1,000. If I spend $1 or $5 or $10 on people, it's not really going to be the death of me. $100, $50. The more concentrated that FAB pool in the beginning is going to be, the more careful you have to be with your money, obviously. All these tips sound pretty no-brainer, but I get questions on it every single stinking week. Big thing I wanted to touch on is making trades. I could probably have a 30-minute segment alone on how to make a trade. What's the best way to go about it? One thing I learned from a former colleague of mine, Lenny Melnick, again going back to fantasy baseball, is the best way to always start a trade for me is to not send an email. It's to not send a text. I know it's kind of old school, picking up the phone and actually speaking with someone, but I actually like to talk to someone on the phone when I'm trying to work through a trade with them. I find that speaking with them directly tends to lead to a higher success rate of a trade actually occurring in the first place. You get to kind of hear the tone a little bit better in terms of what the other manager's looking for. And if you're Rico Suave when it comes to pointing things out, you might be able to kind of, ease your way into things a little bit better. You can't force trades, though. I think that's the other thing you need to know. When Bob gets questions, a multitude of them on Twitter, and when I get these questions as well, hey, my entire league is out there, and I really want to trade Robbie Anderson. Who should I target? Well, when you have a trade, it's going to take two parties to tango. The easiest thing to do is to go ahead and take a look, like I said, going back to those strengths and weaknesses of your roster. Where can you improve? If you know that you need a wide receiver and another team's strong at that point and you have running backs to spare, there might be a match there, but you cannot force a trade. If you do try to force a trade and it just creates a more unbalanced structure in the league, then you might get the finger pointing at collusion and it might just get ugly, and you don't want to do that. So look, takes two to tango. You need to know which parties to contact. I would strongly encourage you, face-to-face is really the best thing to do, but pick up the phone. I find a lot gets lost in translation with the age of social media now, with text messages and emails and in-game message systems on all these different websites and stuff like that. The easiest way to make a trade is just to go ahead and do that. As a couple different little tips I've picked up with trades, generally speaking, when you want to have a particular player and you know that I want player A and I want to trade away player B, if I'm trying to sell a trade to Bob as an example, and I want to highlight all the positives of the guys that I'm giving away. Well, man, I really hate to part with this particular player. I mean, he does really have a lot of upside, and he's been great for me in the past. I mean, just take a look at what he did week 3. I mean, he could really repeat that again. I don't know if I really want to give up that. That's a lot better to say than, oh, yeah, you can have Bob. You want to phrase things in a certain way where it really looks like you're getting the screws turned on giving up these particular players. As is, you also, when you want to point out players that you're inheriting, strong thing to do is just to say, look, I really want to get this particular running back. I mean, I know it comes with a certain amount of risk, but man, I really think that the upside's there and it's worth taking, but it really kills me to do this trade. When you just start to say these little things like this, again, in person or over the phone, knowing the mindset of the other player, and everybody always wants to win a trade. Some people, and you always want to say, well, how did I do on this trade? Did I win the trade? Everybody's going to give up something in a trade. In an ideal trade, you give up, you get. Your team might improve in a certain area, might go down in a certain area. If you just flat out fleece the other guy, it's rare, but it's going to happen here and there. But I get these questions all the time. Who won this trade? Who got the better end of this trade? Bottom line is, if both parties feel like they've improved their team, then that's ultimately what you want to accomplish. 2 other quick points, and then I'll obviously take any questions that Bob might have gotten here real fast. Bye weeks. Always try to get players the week ahead in bye weeks. I think that Bob will definitely agree with this. Every single bye week that's coming up, you're going to see, oh, well, like next week, this guy's projections go way up, and my team is suffering because I have 10 guys out this week. Try to always take a look at that 1 week prior. If there's maybe a player, an extra defense you might have carrying around, get rid of that guy or get rid of that team or whatever the week prior to you actually needing them. If it's a certain spot where you think you can kind of have that end of bench rotation, the amount of fab money that you will save doing that, as opposed to then it being that week and then, oh, well, their projection this week's a 5, but next week's a 15. Going against all the other players, again, it's going to save you a lot in the short run. Kickers and defenses as a whole, just to go back to that topic, I don't generally put a lot of money in them during drafts. I stream them. If you don't know how to stream defenses, just take a look at our website. We have lots of good articles about that. And the last point that I will make is handcuffing. I like to handcuff. I might be the minority about handcuffing. I know that kind of goes a little bit back to the draft itself, but if you're able to obtain the direct handcuff to a running back in your format, and obviously the deeper the league, the more viable the strategy this is going to be. I like having those guys on my team in advance. I would rather have the guaranteed backup, if you want to term it that way, to a particular player, and not having to worry about getting to a fab war where I may or may not win out or lose out on the guy. And look, it might only be on the top 5-10 people, when it comes to the running back spots, but I'd rather have those guys in advance. So if they go undrafted, if James Conner goes undrafted or something like that, in years past, we always used to take a look at Adrian Peterson's backups and pick up the Gerhardts of the world, but get those guys in advance. I'd recommend that as well. I'd rather have a guaranteed guy as opposed to a flyer wide receiver. So those are just some tips and tricks. Bob, do we pick up any questions along the way?
To follow up on what you were asking, Jim Day asked, when it comes to waivers, do you recommend using most of your money really to get the breakout guys, or make sure to hold some players for late? And got another similar question from Kieran Mann in terms of not eating up your budget. Do you look to have fab into the playoffs? I know that there are different approaches to this. What do you recommend?
Well, like going back to kind of what I said before, if you know that a particular player is going to be inheriting a role for a longer period of time, obviously the more you're going to want to bid on them. I do like to have some fab left for the end of the year. I don't like to completely exhaust it and blow it all in the first couple weeks if I can help it. Again, speaking from the commissioner standpoint, I would also recommend commissioners allowing managers in their league to bid $0 on fab. I know, again, that sounds a bit crazy, but I like to have that ability as well. Generally speaking, again, earlier in the season, more guaranteed the role is going to be, the more aggressive I'm going to be, especially at running back. You're going to really pay dividends for that. With these wide receivers, whether it gets to be, especially in a PPR format, a guy, look, he might be the new slot receiver for Team ABC. Picking up those roles, I will be aggressive on them. Still like to have a couple bucks left at the end, but if I take a look at $100 in my pool, I would say at least $60 to $70 is probably going to be gone for me no later than maybe week 6 or 7. Okay. I generally am more aggressive earlier in the season.
Right. Mike Dempsey, if you didn't see him talking trades yesterday, he is one of those people that will spend all his fab week 1 if he has to. And just a quick point before I get to the next question, Mendo Bruce saying he doesn't think Connor is Bell's replacement. Had Adam Kaplan on our Sirius show today. He was just at Steelers camp. I know a lot of people are on Jalen Samuels, who will have a role, but Kaplan still thinks Bell is the direct replacement for now. We'll see how that goes. One other question along the lines of what you've been talking about, and I think you addressed this, but let's get a little more specific. How long
Sure.
you hold on to that underperforming guy? Does it depend on who it is?
A lot does depend upon who it is. Does it depend upon their track record? Does it is the player dealing with an injury? Is that one of the big things? A lot of days nowadays, you have these cryptic. Well, I really didn't want to tell my coach that I was dealing with a hamstring strain, and I couldn't really perform at 100%. Look, that's going to happen, but the more you spent in the draft to obtain a particular talent, the longer I'm willing to sit through and suffer with some, growing pains through the handful of weeks. And there's going to be other factors as well. Is there a new offensive system? Is there a new coordinator that they're dealing with? Is a different quarterback behind helm? Especially in this season where a lot of these, playoff-bound quote-unquote teams have new quarterbacks, they're going to have to get used to playing with these guys as well. So I'll be patient with a lot of these players. If it's a guy that you drafted just pure upside, Hail Mary type in the beginning, and it gets to be week 3 or 4 and he's done bump guess, cut him.
Yeah, my new mantra is September is the new August, right? And that makes October the new September. Some of this has to do with the workout rules. The CBA keeps the teams from having the same amount of contact, working the same amount over the offseason. And it takes a little longer for the offense to gel. And I think that also is that factors in is coaches worried about getting their superstars hurt. We just don't see the big names playing. I'm fine with that as a fantasy owner, but I think that early, offensive turmoil is kind of a byproduct of that.
Yep.
All right. So we're going to wrap up. Evan, anyone got any last second question here before I run him off for the night? We've got Dr. Roto standing by to come on and talk a little bit about his draft strategy. So I want to say thanks to Evan. You can find him on Twitter at Roto_Wizard. Be sure to check him out. Hit him up on Twitter. Evan, if you have a minute, stay in the chat and maybe, have a little interaction. And thank you so much for the time. Great job.
I'm more than happy to. I know in-season management's kind of a big topic, so I tried my best to just kind of glaze over stuff.
Oh, you got it. So any more specific questions?
What's up, Doc?
Hit him up in the chat. And there he is, Dr. Roto, got his visionary draft strategy. You can follow Doc on Twitter at Dr. Roto. He's from Scout Fantasy. They do great stuff over there, great contests, great content. And Dr. Roto, the driving force behind that. So I want to get out of your way because the visionary draft strategy, I got to get my notes ready. So I'll be standing by, Doc, if you need me, but I know you've probably got this covered pretty well.
Oh, yeah. You just say I'm like a wind-up dog. Just let me go talk fantasy football for the next 5 hours for you. But
the floor is yours, sir.
So glad to be part of the Fantasy Football Summit. I think it's an amazing idea. I wish I came up with it. I think Emil and Bob are geniuses, so I hope it's been a great experience for everybody. So what I'm going to do is give you some of my visionary draft strategies. I'm going to share some of my high-stakes fantasy secrets with you. And hopefully we'll have time at the end for some questions if I don't ramble on from too much. I'll have some sleepers, some busts, and some things that you just should do or should not do if you want to win a fantasy football championship. So let's start out with visionary strategy number 1. Very simple. Use ADPs to know what your competitors are doing. Okay? I look at ADPs as much as the next guy, but I never draft according to ADPs. Right? I want to know the ADP, though, because I want to know what the other people in the room are thinking. Because most people are physically attached to the ADP. They look at the number, and they don't want to move too far from it. Right? So if this guy's at 54, they'll never take him at 42 because that's too early. So as a high-stakes fantasy player, a lot of people say, well, what's the difference between a high-stakes player and just a person who plays fantasy football with their friends? I think the difference is high-stakes players jump at a player earlier than the ADP because we know that we can't wait, right? So if there's a guy at 54 and I see him there at 38 or whatever it is where I'm picking, I'm going to take him because I know that he won't be there when I pick again. So I use ADPs specifically to know what you're going to do. Now, if I'm in a league with 12 other high-stakes players, well, then I got to figure that out. But that's how I use ADPs, okay? So what I want you to do, don't stick to them like glue. Know where they are, know where guys are going, and then make your own judgments, okay? Visionary strategy number 2, and this one is crucial. Don't pay for last year's statistics. Now, last year was one of my best years in fantasy football. I really did a great job. I got to be honest with you. Got lucky. Maybe I didn't. Maybe it was skill. But I'll tell you this. I had Zach Ertz in every single draft I did where I won in the 7th round. Why? I just thought he was destined for a really good year. He never could stay healthy. He always had great second halves, but never could put together a full season. Well, last year he did. Now what round is Zach Ertz going in? Zach Ertz is going in the late 3rd, early 4th rounds, and I won't pay it. Why? Because I don't want to pay for last year's statistics. I want to go find this year's Zach Ertz, right? That's my job. I found him last year. Now I got to find him this year. Is it Trey Burton? Is it George Kittle? Is it Jack Doyle? I don't know. I got to figure that part out. That's on me. But if I take Zach Ertz in the 3rd round, I'm paying over 100% of value. Do you ever go to a car dealer and if it's on the sticker price, it's like $25,000, you say to the dealer, I'll pay 28? No, you always want to get less. 25,000, I want to buy the car for 22. So when you're buying Zach Ertz at full price, you're paying too much for last year's numbers. I don't want to win in 2017. I did back in 2017. I want to win in 2018. So I encourage you, think about this, what I'm saying very carefully. Don't overpay for last year's numbers. Critical. All right. Moving forward. Visionary strategy number 3. I hate rankings. People ask me all the time, Dr. Roto, where can I find your rankings? Well, you can find them on scoutfantasysports.com. That's where you find my rankings, Adam Ronis' rankings, and Sean Childs' rankings. But I don't like my rankings. I'm going to tell you what I like. Later on, probably in late August, maybe even early September, but I'm thinking late August, I'm going to come out with my tiered visionary rankings. And why do I like tiers so much? Because I look at players not necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4, but in tiers. So, for example, Gurley, Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, David Johnson, Saquon Barkley. I'll take any one of those guys. And Kamar, excuse me. I'll take any one of those guys. They're in a tier for me. I don't worry about whether, do I have this guy at 4 or this guy at 3? I'll make that judgment when I'm drafting. I just want to know who's in my top tier, who's in that next tier. This way, we don't get so caught up in, well, then this guy's the next guy on my list. I never feel that way when I draft. So when I'm drafting, and let's say I'm about 4 or 5 picks away from my pick, I start combing through the lists. So let's say it's about 4 picks away from me. I write down the 5 players I like next and think about it. Who's the best quarterback? Who's the best running back? Who's the best wide receiver? As it gets closer to me, if those guys get taken, I cross them off my list. School. I use the pen, click, and the paper. All right? I'm old school that way. But I will tell you, I cross the names off Then when it comes to me, I look at the 2 or 3 guys I have left, and then I determine who do I need more. This guy going to catch more balls? Is this guy going to run for more touchdowns? Whatever it is. But I worry about it in tiers. I look at players that way. I don't get caught up and say, this guy's off my list. He's the next one. I might have to take that player. Be very careful with your rankings. I find if you look at tiers, you will have a much better draft experience. And you won't panic when you get sniped, because that's what happens. How many drafts where you're like, oh my God, I just got sniped. This guy ruined my draft. I never worry about somebody ruining my draft. I worry about me ruining my own draft, right? So I worry about that. So that's why I have tiers, because I don't want anybody to ruin my draft experience. Okay. So years ago, I used to work for Roto Experts, and I used to be on in the mornings with Scott Engel and Adam Ronis. And Engel and I, the King, had this huge fight years ago. And here, one of many, obviously. And one of the fights we had was about drafting in a vacuum. I always want to know what the people around me have or need in a draft. So, for example, how many quarterbacks have been taken? If nobody's taken their quarterbacks yet, maybe I can wait. If 9 teams have a quarterback, maybe I have to act quickly. Or what about, imagine you're picking second, right? And it goes up the first round and now it comes back the second round. I want to see what number 1 has, right? So moving forward, let's just say it's round 7 or 8, right? If it's round 8, does he have a tight end? If he doesn't have a tight end, maybe I take my tight end at that pick so that when it comes around the turn, I don't lose a guy, right? So I'm going to see what this guy needs, the guy next to me needs, and I'm going to be ahead of them. So if this guy needs a tight end and there's only one I like, I pull the tight end there because he might take it around the bend. Does that make sense? You want to know, I can't know what everybody's doing in the draft, but I want to know what the guy next to me is doing and maybe the guy on the other side of me. So if I'm picking 2, I want to know what team 1 and team 3 need for sure. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about it, but before I pick, I'm going to pay close attention. And I also do something else. And this is a great strategy for you. When I'm down to picking between 2 players, I ask myself a very important question. Which player is most likely to last when I pick again? So if I'm picking between T.Y. Hilton and let's say, I don't know, Tyreek Hill, I'm going to take Hilton because I think I can get Hill on the way back. Because if I take Hill first, I know that Hilton's going to be taken. Does that make sense? So when you're trying to decide who to pick, try to think of the guy who's going to be there next and take the guy that you know won't be, because if you don't take him then, you won't have the opportunity to get him. Okay? So you need to know, don't draft in a vacuum. Know who's around you, know what they need so you don't make a mistake. And I think it really does happen with quarterbacks. I do. I think it really happens with quarterbacks. I don't want the 12th quarterback. I don't need the first guy. I don't need Aaron Rodgers. I don't need Deshaun Watson. I need a guy I can win with. There are some quarterbacks who I know I can win with, and I want to identify those guys before the draft starts. Russell Wilson, can I win with him? Sure. Kirk Cousins, can I win with him? If so, then I want to make sure I get one of those guys who I can win with. I can't wait too long, and I want to know what people around me are going to do. Okay? All right. This is one of my favorite ones here. Avoid holy rosters. And here's what I mean by that. When you take a tight end too early, you know what you just left in your roster? A big old hole. I try to avoid taking Rob Gronkowski in round 2 or 3. I try to avoid taking Travis Kelce in round 3. I find when I take tight ends too early, I'm always searching for a running back or receiver later in the draft. Ideally, now this is a perfect world, I want to take my tight end somewhere between round 9 and 10. In the first 8 rounds, I want to get a combination of receivers and running backs, the best combination I can come up with. In rounds 9, 10, and 11, I want to come home with a quarterback and a tight end. I don't know which rounds, but that's when I'm starting to look at those guys, right? Those are the guys that I'm looking for. Round 9, 10, 11, that's the quarterback. Those are the tight ends. I'm not taking Gronk. You can have him, great player. But if I take Gronk, I'm going to be short at a wide receiver. If I take Kelsey, I'm going to be missing a running back, and I never want to do that, okay? I find I have the most success when I wait on that tight end, much like I did last year. Now, last year I struck a little early with Zach Ertz in round 7. I'll start thinking tight end maybe round 7, but I really want to pull it around 9 or 10. But if there's a guy I like, Greg Olsen, Evan Engram, guy like that, I might jump around it too early if I have to. Depends on the draft room, depends what other people are doing. Got to be smart when you're drafting, and you got to know what everybody else around you is doing. So careful there. Don't get too cute in your drafts. Make sure you build up your running backs and your wide receivers. That's how you win. Okay? That's how you win. All right. Here's another draft strategy for you. I never know who I'm going to come home with in a draft. I never do. It's not because I'm unprepared. I'm fully prepared. But I'll never forget this. My very first year playing fantasy sports, I'm playing in a fantasy baseball league with a good friend of mine, and he wanted some Yankee. I don't remember who the guy was, but we didn't get him. After we don't get him, he literally takes his pen and chucks it in the room. And I'm looking at him like, dude, seriously? I mean, you really care that much? He's like, well, I really like that guy. He's like my favorite player. You know how many favorite players I have? Those are my favorite players are the guys who win me games and win me money. Those are my favorite players. It's Dalvin Cook this week and Saquon Barkley next week. I don't care who I have in a league as long as I win. If you play with your heart and not your head, you will lose fantasy football. You may love the Dallas Cowboys. That doesn't mean you need to take Zeke Elliott. If Todd Gurley's on the board, you should probably take Todd Gurley. And I think, to me, I think it's great to be a fan. Ronas and I always joke. Ronas is a big Cowboy fan. And I'll say, Ronas, do you care more about the Cowboys or your fantasy team? I like the Cowboys. Now, look, I like the Giants, but if the Giants lose, I'll get over it. If my fantasy team loses, I don't get over it so well when my fantasy team loses. I'm pretty upset. I'm way more upset when my fantasy team loses than the Giants because I'm used to the Giants losing. I've seen it happen for years. I won't even talk about the Jets. They can't even sign. They just signed their quarterback. It only took them longer than anybody else. So don't fall in love with the players. Go buy your jersey. Wear your Deshaun Watson jersey at the draft. Good for you. It doesn't mean you have to draft him. Okay? Just remember that. You start drafting with your heart, you're going to lose your fantasy football league. Clear as that. All right. I want to give you guys some sleepers. I'll give you guys some busts, and then we'll open it up to some questions. Hopefully you have a few. That would be nice. I'm going to give you 3 of my favorite sleepers this year. I'll start out with a quarterback. I love me some Patrick Mahomes this year. I love this guy. I love guys who are not afraid to fail. The only way you can succeed in life is by being aggressive in anything you do. Whatever it is, do it to the best of your ability. If you play too conservatively, you most likely lose. It's like playing tennis. When you play tennis, if you're just trying to keep the ball on the court, you're probably going to lose. If you try to hit and play well, you can have a great chance to win. Patrick Mahomes, he's a gunslinger. Now, when they compare him to Brett Favre, easy now. But I compare his mentality to Brett Favre. What I loved about Brett Favre is this guy would chuck it 60 yards down the field, and if he threw an interception, so be it. He was playing to win. Patrick Mahomes does the same thing, and that's what I really like for fantasy purposes. I think he's going to have some bad games. Denver Broncos, that might be a nightmare. It's possible. But he's got Tyreek Hill. He's got Sammy Watkins-Roto. By the way, his aunt is my bank teller. The dude is in Kansas City for a reason. He wanted to be in a small city with a team that wanted him. So I'm telling you, he's happy in Kansas City. Not everybody is, but he's happy there. Oh, don't forget, he has Travis Kelce and Kareem Hunt. Can you think of a better group of skill set players in the NFL than that group? That's a pretty good group. And Andy Reid, when he allows guys to have to throw the ball, he's a visionary quarterback, coach in the first half. Alex Smith was a bus driver, but I don't think Patrick Mahomes is. Andy Reid is going to be upset when Mahomes is still chucking the ball in the fourth quarter, but I love it. And I'm going to have this guy in a few of my teams for sure. Keep your eye on Royce Freeman. I just think that there's something special about this kid. I watch a lot of college football. I watched this guy play at Oregon. This guy was a real good player. And I think the Denver Broncos were desperate for a running back. Desperate. Devontae Booker, a nice runner, but he's not the answer. Certainly not in first and second down. Maybe as a third down running back. I think Royce Freeman is going like round 5, round 6, and that's pretty good value. He's going to be there in first and second downs. If he can show that he can catch the football, he might be there in third downs because Booker's no revelation. This guy fumbles all the time. So I'm getting touchdowns, I'm getting carries, and I'm getting some value. There's nothing wrong with that. Keep your eyes on Royce Freeman. How about Allen Hurns? Dak Prescott has nobody to throw to. All right, Michael Gallup, he's a rookie. I'm worried about him. All right, he's a rookie. Doesn't know the route tree yet. But Allen Hurns, people tend to forget about Allen Hurns. Great hands. Great hands. Runs terrific routes. Always finds a way to get open and has a nose for the end zone. Is he the fastest receiver? Not a chance. But when Dak Prescott turns around, Hurns is going to be open. And Dallas needs a passing attack because they don't really have one. Zeke is going to see a football a ton this year. I think Allen Hurns is sneaky, and you could probably get him as a wide receiver 3 or 4 in your drafts. Really like him. All right, so let me give you some busts. I'll give you 3 that I can think of. 1, I want no part of Michael Crabtree. He will not be on a visionary roster at all this year. Why? Joe Flacco is done. I don't care what Peter King reports that Joe Flacco looks better than ever. That is bogus, okay? They're already finding ways to get Lamar Jackson on the field. Believe that. Believe that. And Lamar Jackson, great athlete, not a premier pocket passer, okay? Not a premier pocket passer. So Crabtree is coming to a new offense. What was Joe Flacco's yards per attempt last year? Anybody know that off the top of their head? 5.7. That's like me throwing it. Oh, dink and dunk. I don't like it at all. Crabtree's numbers go down 20% this year. You want to take him in the 6th round? Good luck. I won't be taking him. Next, Marshawn Lynch. Now look, I'm a John Gruden fan. I have all the respect in the world for Chucky. All the respect in the world for Chucky. But what's going on with that team? Seriously, he's like bringing in old retreads. I'm worried that this team's not going to play well at all. They're going to Vegas. I think they're on the way down, not the way up. And I don't know. I just have a feeling Marshawn Lynch is going to go higher in drafts than I'm willing to take. There's Doug Martin. I don't know. I think Gruden was great, and bringing him back, maybe they're trying to channel his inner Dick Vermeil and he'll be better this time. I don't know. I think Gruden was great the last time. I respected him as an announcer. I just don't like what I'm seeing with the Raiders. I'm very, very nervous. I'll be passing on Marshawn Lynch. You want him, you can have him. Last guy I guarantee I'm not taking. Jordan Reed. Firstly, the guy's always injured. We know that, right? The guy's always injured. Secondly, he's now playing with Alex Smith, bus driver extraordinaire. So you got Jamison Crowder, Josh Doxson, Geis, Thompson, and you really think that Jordan Reed's going to get the football that much? No chance. Jordan Reed is a name. People are going to take him early. Chance he plays 16 games? 0. Chance he's on my roster? 0. So that's a big old bust. I'm not touching any part of it. All right, Bob, that was the visionary draft strategy here. We've got any questions for people?
Outstanding. Yeah, we do have some questions. One guy here, what is the impact of Andrew Luck on T.Y. Hilton, Doc? He was able to get Hopkins and Keenan Allen with the first 2 picks and spent a 3rd or 4th on Hilton. Do you have a lot of hopes for Hilton? Look for more boom than bust with Andrew Luck back?
Yeah, I am totally checking into the T.Y. Hilton this year, unequivocally. Look, Andrew Luck, think about it this way. Is there a more valuable player to his team than Andrew Luck? No. He raises the value of Nyheim Hines, of Marlon Mack, of T.Y. Hilton, of Eric Ebron, of Jack Doyle. T.Y. Hilton was a 2nd-round pick in Vegas for the last couple of years. He wasn't last year because Luck wasn't there. He comes back. Hilton is a 2nd-round player, maybe early 3rd. So I think his value increases dramatically. I'm rooting for Andrew Luck. I'll tell you, I had a torn labrum. It hurts. So if he's coming back, hopefully he's healthy, and I'm ready to see him.
So this one interests me because, look, a lot of times I'll draft for opportunity rather than upside, especially late. Guy like Kelvin Benjamin, look, I don't have a lot of hopes for him. I don't think he's going to be a huge superstar. There's, offensive line woes. There's McCoy's age and his status. There's 3 young quarterbacks all unproven. But when I'm in the 12th round and a wide receiver 1's still there and people are out picking the Michael Gallups of the world, I don't have a problem with Benjamin. How do you feel about that kind of play? There are other guys like that right now.
No, that's a great question. So look, opportunity equals touches, touches equals points. Tell me who else Buffalo is going to throw to.
Maybe
Clay,
Charles Clay.
Dave
Maybe.
Jones. I mean,
Maybe.
LaShawn McCoy.
Not so much.
Right. So I think Kelvin Benjamin is in the right spot. Now, do I like this team? No, I think the offense is in shambles. Do I like Josh Allen? Maybe 2 or 3 years down the road. But Kelvin Benjamin is going to see 70 catches. He's going to see 900 yards. He's going to get 7 or 8 touchdowns. He's an ideal 4th receiver. I think the problem is people are going to take him as a 3rd receiver, and I'd rather have him as a 4th.
Exactly, and I think that's the key. Dave Cherney would like to know your thoughts on the Titans' passing attack this season. We know Matt LaFleur comes in. We have hopes that the exotic smash mouth goes away and gives way to this fantastic new offense a la the Rams or the 49ers with LaFleur's connections to both those coaches. Your thoughts with that passing attack?
Yeah, I just had Greg Arias from Pro Football Spot, who covers the Titans, on my show last week. Greg is a fountain of information when it comes to the Titans. So first, Matt LaFleur is there now, which is a big upgrade. Mariota is going to have a much improved year, so I think he's taking another step into becoming one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Corey Davis is legit. Okay, Corey Davis is a legitimate wide receiver. I think he's a 4th, 5th round pick in high-stakes leagues. I like Rashard Matthews still. He's a very safe player. Take a look at Tywan Taylor. This guy, he just had a play on Twitter where he looked phenomenal. You still have Delaney Walker, who they signed to a contract extension, and don't forget Jonnu Smith. On top of that, you have a running game with Derrick Henry, and you got Dion Lewis out of the backfield. So I think there are a lot of weapons for the Titans, and if I had to give you one sleeper quarterback who I think is being overlooked in drafts this year, it might just be Marcus Mariota.
Yeah. How long is too long to wait for your quarterback? Just, look, I'm okay waiting. I know you talked about it a bit, but look, when I'm getting Phillip Rivers in round 10 and beyond round 12 and Matthew Stafford, I'm just looking for a solid weekly production. Maybe I get one of those guys with maybe an upside guy, Patrick Mahomes being one of my favorites as well as the upside guy. Maybe I have to draft Mahomes before I draft my steady Eddie. But how do you feel? What's the latest you'll go?
It's a tough question because it depends on your league. In high stakes, it's a game of chicken. I've seen guys literally wait till round 15 to take a quarterback because they don't want to be the first one to pull it. I can tell you this. Think of the quarterbacks who you can win your league with. I think there's about 7 or 8 of those guys. Put them on a list. As each one goes, cross it out and see when it's left. When that last guy is there, that's when you pull the quarterback. Because I don't think you're winning your league with Alex Smith. I don't think you're winning your league with Mitch Trubisky. I don't think you're winning your league with guys like that. So I don't think you're winning it with Marcus Mariota. Mariota needs to be part of a tandem. If you have Mariota and Phillip Rivers, maybe you win the league. But you don't win it with Mariota. So you have to figure out a combination of how you can do it. Now, I'll tell you something that works for me. Between rounds 9 and 13, I want to get 2 of my quarterbacks.
Right.
Maybe rounds 10 and 12, 11 and 13, 9 and 13. But in that pocket there,
I like back-to-back a lot. Yeah, back-to-back is something I do a lot. Just go in, get one, get the other, maybe wait till the low end of that range. A related question from Evan out there. Is Jared Goff being undervalued? Additional weapons, second year under McVay, first year pretty fantastic. Are we putting too much in that, or is he going about where you like him?
I think he's totally undervalued. I love this guy. What is there not to like? He's got a visionary coach. I love Sean McVay. And if I had a coach as a roto child, it would be Sean McVay. You've got Brandon Cooks. You've got Cooper Kupp. You've got Robert Woods, who was exceptional. You've got Tyler Higbee, who's stepping up with Gerald Everett at tight end. You've got Todd Gurley. I mean, what's not to like? And you've got Goff, who's more confident than ever. Can you win with Goff? I don't know, but I know if you pair Goff with Mahomes, or you pair Goff with Garoppolo, or you pair Goff with Rivers or Mariota, you can win your league.
Right. I talked to Joe Curley from the Ventura County Star a couple weeks ago, and he said to go back and look at the highlights of the Rams last year, their biggest plays, and see how many Gerald Everett was involved in. Overall, not great, but some really spike plays, a guy to watch, knowing McVay's history with that. What pick in the draft is ideal for drafting this year in a 12-league snake draft for you? Where do you want to be at?
You know, that's a great question. I think one of the things I thought about talking about tonight was I don't care where I draft. I can win from any point in a draft. Yep. I don't want to be, oh, I've got pick 2, I got pick 11. Doesn't matter. If I'm the best drafter that day and I make the right moves, I can win. That said, I think I'd rather be 6 on because I want to get that second running back in round 2. I don't really like the end of round 2. The end of round 2 has names like Baldwin and Hilton and Evans. I'm okay, but I really want to see names like Devontae Adams and Melvin Gordon and A.J. Green. So if I can be somewhere between 6 and 12, I'll like that more than 1 through 6.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. And look, I want one of the top 4. I'm fine there. But if I'm in like a dynasty or something where I can trade down the Mike Dempsey ploy, get some value, you're still going to get good picks later on. And we tend to overvalue that first pick, and we can really gain some value with it in trades, etc. Okay, a lot of people playing the best ball, Doc. Got any guys that you're looking for in those last couple rounds? The total flyers, off the wall receivers. I know. Look, in some of these drafts, I'm going for Quincy and Nunwa. A guy, just again, drafting opportunities late for guys that maybe disappointed last year, disappeared last year. Anybody on that list for you?
I want you guys to think of it this way. Evan, in the last segment, was talking about handcuffs, so he liked handcuffs. He was getting kinky there for a second, but I'm talking about in football handcuffs. Here's who I like. Think about guys who get injured and who will replace them. For example, if Mike Evans is out, Chris Godwin is in. If Antonio Brown is out, James Washington is in. So those are the type of guys that I'd look at in maybe around 16 through 24, right? Guys who are one injury away from winning me a lot of games. They may do nothing for me. I'm prepared for that. But if a guy gets injured, I capitalize and I have a guy who's a star.
And you want the plug-and-play guy. I know Jim Day's in the chat saying Mike Wallace late in best ball, and I agree with that. Adam Kaplan, again, jumped in today and was mentioning Mac Hollins is a guy who's actually competing for that spot right now. Something to watch as camp goes on. I think at this point, yeah, I'm still drafting Mike Wallace. Don't know that Hollins has done enough to make it sustained. Some of the backfield situations that always confound us. You got the Tennessee backfield, got the New England backfield. I mean, there's a bunch of them. Let's start with New England quickly. Your thoughts there, the investment in Sony Michele, is it enough for you to be interested in him, or is that just too dicey a situation?
There's no dice for me. I watched Sony Michele play in Georgia. He's a star. I mean, I know there's some talk now about him not playing so well. Let's get over that. It's training camp. When the game is on the line, Sony Michele is a terrific young player. I think if you take him in round 5, you'll get a steal. I like Rex Burkhead. He's a Danny Woodhead clone to me, and I'm a big fan, okay? I'm saying this, I like Burkhead, but I really like Michele. He's just got a gear that nobody has seen on the Patriots that I think is special. And don't overlook him. He may have a couple of games where he doesn't do anything, but he may have 10 games where he helps you win.
Draft capital means something, guys. The Patriots don't spend that all the time. This means something. And conversely, look, Dion Lewis looked like a guy to me who can handle anything. I'm sure if anyone's on Twitter today, they saw the Twins photo that the Titans posted of Derrick Henry and his son Dion Lewis. But how are you handling that? Do you think they're going in the right places?
Well, look, I'm a big Derrick Henry fan. I think you have to feed the monster. This is a big dude who needs 20 touches. He will get 20 touches. The question is going to be Dion Lewis. I think the guy's going to get 5 to 8 carries a game, but I think he's going to get 4 to 6 receptions a game. It's Derrick Henry's receptions that I'm worried about. I think he gets 18 to 20 carries. I think he gets close to 1,000 yards rushing. But I need Derrick Henry to get 30 receptions or more to be a PPR stud. If he's only giving me 18 to 22, it's not good enough in PPR formats. So I'm a Derrick Henry guy. I'm a believer. If I get him in round 5 this year, I'll be pretty happy.
All right, boys and girls, that is the amazing Dr. Roto. You know him from Scout Fantasy. You can find him all over the Twitter at Dr. Roto, DRROTO. Ask him questions, hit him up there. He'll help you out. And check out Scout Fantasy. Great contests and great content. Love it all. Doc, thanks for the time tonight.
Thanks, guys. Be well and take care.
Thank you, sir. And there he is. Hussein the Brain is on the job already. Hussein, glad to have you on. In case everybody out there doesn't know him, Hussein is from the Fantasy Couch. He's here to give us his 10 commandments of drafting. I'm going to give you the floor, Hussein, and then I'm going to be here hanging around. We'll have questions coming in if you need them. I'll be standing by. So, sir, the floor is yours. By the way, follow him at Hussein the Brain, Hussein the Brain.
Or
all
just
yours, brother.
At Fantasy Couch.
Yes, that too.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Hussein the Brain with Fantasy Couch. Thank you so much, Emil. Thank you so much, Bob Harris, for having me on. Football diehards. They're OGs, but they're also up with the modern game, and I love them so much for not hating on everyone and bringing everyone together. First and foremost, I want to start out with saying that fantasy football is supposed to be fun, right? And in order to have fun, you got to win, but you always got to have fun. Like I get, it's very rare, but I do get comments where like, this is so stressful. I don't know what to do. And people get angry. And it's like, man, if you ain't having fun, just stop. This is supposed to be fun. It's a game. Like the people playing it having fun, and we're just watching on the sidelines. We're supposed to be having fun too. So you got to have fun. You got to win too, though. I mean, it goes hand in hand. I like to think that I'm a pure YouTuber, and I don't really think there's too many pure YouTuber fantasy football channels out there. There's a lot of great football YouTube channels. There's a lot of great fantasy football YouTube channels, but I like to think of myself as a pure YouTuber. I only got 30 minutes. We're going to rush through this real fast. We'll have some questions we'll go through. Let's start off with the 10 commandments of drafting. Let me try to get this to work. Let's see what we got. Okay. And then boom. This. Okay. And not really working.
Go ahead and hit it that second time. I'm saying it sometimes.
Yeah. I think we got it, huh?
There it comes. There it comes.
All right. So I teach a lot of new people how to play fantasy football. So those parts I'm going to run through super fast. But I got to run through all 10 of these guys. So the first one, of course, super boring. Yes, know your league rules and settings. You can just ask the commish, hey, guys, is there anything weird about this league? Are you guys doing first downs? Like, you get points for first downs? Like, anything crazy? Is it dynasty? Just everyone knows this, though. On to the next one. Be prepared. And the number one thing that about being prepared is that we all have limited time. We all want to be efficient. Like, even someone like me who does this full time, I still don't have, we have limited time in the day. So the number one thing I look at is ADP, because it's super fast, it's super easy. It at least gives you an idea of where people are going. And even if you really love somebody, maybe you can not reach for them and wait a couple rounds. So ADP is always something I look at. Make sure you're looking at recent ADP. Rankings is something that I find a little bit overvalued, especially overall rankings. Overall rankings are really good. When I look at the top 20, maybe I know what to do in the first round to maybe up to the third, but really the first round. After that, overall rankings are stupid. Like, I don't care where you rank Lamar Jackson or something. If I already have a quarterback, I don't care where you're ranking the Titans defense. If I already drafted the Broncos defense, like, overall rankings is usually a waste of time. Still good to look at the top 20, but other than that, not really. And mock drafts, like, I came out with a video called The Art of Mock Drafting, guys. And there's just so many ways to mock draft. It's the number one thing about mock drafting I like is that it gives you a comfort level, because I feel like in the average league, nearly half the people in the league are going to screw up. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to make those panic picks. They're going to mess up. And that's how you capitalize on that. Just by being comfortable, I'd say you're going to be better than 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 people in your league. Just comfortable, confident. You're not screwing up. You're not making those panic picks. And to go over really fast how I love the mock draft, I do the free mock. If you're on ESPN League, mock draft on ESPN. You're on Yahoo, mock draft on Yahoo. Do it for free. Yes, there's going to be trolls. Only 1 out of 10 of those are competitive. I like to do the simulations. So mock draft simulator on Fantasy Pros is what I use. I just talked to Emil. Football Diehards is coming out with their simulator. It's in beta mode. So try any simulator you can. That's pretty good. The reason I like that is because they take 5 minutes compared to a mock draft, which takes 7 minutes to load, and then somebody drafts like 10 Browns players. So, guys, doing mock drafts in several different ways is amazing. And then, if you want to take it a step further, do a free league. a little bit more competitive than a mock draft, and just be a jerk. I've been called worse names when I do this, and don't even play in that league. It's a free league anyway. No one's going to give a crap. Like, nobody plays that stuff. People quit mid-season anyway. But free league, a little bit more competitive than a mock draft. And, of course, doing best ball leagues is amazing. $1. I think they're coming out with 25-cent ones. $10, of course, NFL 10s. Just doing best ball. Now, those are competitive. How I always say is when it's free, when you're playing poker with your buddies for free, and then you put $10 on I don't even play poker, but put $10 on the line, things change fast. Put $10 on a mock draft or best ball league, it'll get competitive really quick. Eliminate all distractions. Make sure your computer's good. Make sure your phone's good. Make sure it's charged. Make sure you don't have a bunch of sticky chicken wings. If you're in a restaurant, go there before. Order your food well beforehand. You don't want to be eating and doing anything. Just keep it basic. Keep it simple. Keep it clean. Number 4. Which brings me to number 4. Keep it clean. I like to have the cheat sheet. I come out with my cheat sheet every year. It's free. It's awesome. It's for PPR leagues, football diehards. I believe they have their cheat sheet. Make sure it's legit. Make sure you just have it's one page. That's why it's awesome. It's one page. You're keeping it simple. Every year in my league, there's a team. Jerry Jones. He's a Cowboys fan. Surprise, surprise. He has 7, 8, 9 highlighters, and he's got a whole notebook. And I don't know what the heck is in that notebook, man. But that's some crazy intense stuff for our offline draft. And I don't even know how he drafts anybody. So just keep it simple on draft day. Don't overcomplicate things. This one is actually okay. So you're like, all right, this is stupid. What are you doing? What is he saying? I know all this. And you think you know this too, but I got a secret with this one. Thou shalt not draft an injured player. Okay. Nowadays we have the apps on our phones and notifications, but just in case that doesn't get through, what I like to do is copy and paste the word Roto World, have my player news ready. So I go to Google, I type in Saquon, then I paste the word Roto World. I do this before any time. It's just about any player I draft, or if I'm in any question. Like I just did a draft. I only did it on 2 players, but it's always good to be safe than to be sorry. And another thing I like to do as a YouTuber, this helps me, is I do 2 mock drafts at the same time. That way I'm able to talk to the camera while I'm mock drafting. And in the real draft, when it comes to it, I'm able to Google stuff and look up stuff fast without being distracted. I'm able to multitask, and I'm a terrible multitasker. So if you want to step up your mock draft game, do 2 mock drafts at the same time. Trust me, the first time you do it, it's going to be bad, but then you'll be good at it. And I've done 3 mock drafts at once before. It gets messy. Number 6, draft for value. This is the most basic one. Reaching's okay every now and then. Don't always reach. Is when we reach, someone yells reach, and it doesn't feel good. You don't want to always be reaching. If you can get a player over here, right? Why are you going to reach for him and get him here? If there's a 95% chance I'm going to get Edelman 2 rounds later, I'm probably not going to draft him here, because that 5% chance I'm risking for a wide receiver, I don't think is worth the risk. So this is the most important one, I think. The one that, if your guys are saying, like, I already know this stuff, is number 7, draft for positional scarcity. All the good fantasy owners and all you vets there that have had success, that do win leagues, you guys already do this, but you may not quantify it. Like, I'm giving you a different perception. I'm putting it into a commandment. I'm listing it for you. I'm putting it in writing right here. And there's a reason why we don't draft the quarterbacks. Always score the most points. There's a reason why we're not drafting a quarterback round 1. It's because positional scarcity. There's a lot of quarterbacks. That's why we draft running backs. Now, I swear, if the roster settings were different, if you had to start 2 quarterbacks and only 1 running back, now all of a sudden running back becomes an average position, like still valuable, like no doubt, still going to be valuable, still somewhat scarce. But now quarterbacks, you want to be drafting, round 5, round 4, round 3. You want to be taking quarterbacks there, and not so much running. You only need 1 good running back, right? So positional scarcity, what that I mean, let me put it into an example here. What that means is, if you really want a wide receiver, like this guy is so much better than any fantasy player on the board, best available, right? He's the best available player. He's a wide receiver stud you absolutely love. But there's 10 wide receivers in that same tier, meaning there's 10 more wide receivers that are similar, that are projected to put up similar numbers to that wide receiver. I'm going to pass up the wide receiver and get that only one running back, that last running. Maybe it's a running back like Rojo. Maybe that's it. After Rojo, maybe there's a huge fall off. Okay. So maybe I go get Ronald Jones or somebody because I know that one running back is scarce. That's the only one left. And we know how running backs are. They're so valuable. But I'm quantifying for you. That's why they're so valuable, is because they're scarce. That positional scarcity. Hope that made sense. Leave some comments if that made sense, and let me know. Let me know if this is good. This is boring. Let me know. We're about to get to some questions. We're almost at number 10, guys. Come on, almost there. Number 8. Don't overvalue quarterbacks. Bleh, of course. What are you gonna say? Everyone knows that, huh? Number 9. Don't worry too much about bye weeks. This is a good one. This is a good one because if you're hating on my 10 commandments right now, I don't care. I'm telling you, over half of things I see is people like, dude, you're doomed week 9. For some reason, I draft all week 9 and 11 players. You're doomed week 9. You're doomed like, who cares? First of all, if I'm doomed week 9, first of all, you're not going to have half your team's going to be different through trades, injuries, waiver wire, free agency, especially if you're drafting early. Like I draft for YouTube so other people can see the draft. It's going to be different. Number 2, I'm really going to pass up on a stud player. Think about how silly that's just saying it out loud. I'm going to pass up on a stud player because a stud running back because I have another running back on bye week 9. That's silly. Don't ever do that. So what I do is if I draft, like I just did a draft, I almost always draft a backup quarterback in mocks, but then I had a draft yesterday. I only took one. So I usually do take a backup. If I take a backup quarterback, I try for his bye week to be different than my starter's bye week. I think that is important, but it's not detrimental. It won't kill your team, okay? And tight end, same thing. I usually draft a backup tight end. If I have 2 tight ends, I try my best for that backup tight end not to have the same bye week as the other one. But it's not detrimental. It won't kill your team. And other than those 2, the backup tight end, backup quarterback, not worried about it. Number 10. Thank you so much, guys. We're at the end of this. Draft the defense and kicker last. So last year, I was saying to draft the Jags D, and it ended up working out great. We were able to get them in the second to last round. I also told people to draft the Steelers D because they had an easy schedule the first 5 games. Both worked out pretty well. Steelers actually, they did pretty good until Shazier was injured. They fell off a little bit. So they actually ended up being a long-term defense. So with this year, though, I don't see any standout defense like the Jags, other than the Rams, but they're being drafted early is my point. So I ranked the Jags number 1, and it's proof I did this. You can check on the YouTube. I actually, told everyone I like the Jags D the most. But I would draft them second to last because there's 2 positions that are the most inconsistent and toughest to project in fantasy, and that's defense and kicker. It's very tough. And look, I can kind of project kickers and whatnot a little bit, but not too much. Like if they're at home, they're 7+ point favorites. I know they're going to move the ball well. They'll probably have the lead, which means they might settle for field goals. I like the kicker. If you want all these, I got a free ebook, The 10 Commandments of Drafting. It's on my website, fantasycouch.com. If you don't want it, that's cool too. Check me out on the YouTubes. What are we doing here, Bob Harris? Do we have any questions? Any haters?
Oh, I have a ton of questions. And we'll start bringing some in. Look, I agree with you at the onesie positions being the only place that I might give consideration to the buys. Otherwise, I'm not worrying at all about it. I mean, if I have a handful of guys I'm going to struggle through, I'll make it work. There's waiver wire. Things change over the course of the season. But I guess, the other question I have about the onesie positions is if you take chances, if you go with a risky guy or, let's say Andrew Luck, you consider him, hey, is he ever going to be Andrew Luck again? Do you ever insure that position with 3 guys, take up 3 roster spots, or say with tight end, you draft Tyler Kroft at some point or Tyler Eifert and say, oh, maybe at the end of the draft, instead of I'll just tack Tyler Kroft on just in case something happens to Eifert early? Or do you just ignore that and just plow forward?
Man, I know you didn't watch my YouTube video, but I just uploaded. I drafted Andrew Luck and I drafted Tyler Eifert. And I didn't want to draft Tyler Eifert. I admit I wanted Andrew Luck. So I drafted Tyler Eifert because 2 tight ends got sniped right before me. I took a gamble. The
price is right? If you're rolling the dice.
Oh, yeah, I said, hey, there's a 10% chance I'll be able to get Burden or Walker, who I don't. Walker's a bit safe for me, but I like Bird.
Right.
And they got 1, 2 right before me. They got picked, so I ended up getting Eifert way later. In this league, it's 8 bench spots, so that's deeper. And in this league, there's an IR spot. So I did draft 3 tight ends. It's something I never do. I drafted 1 quarterback because I just have that confidence and luck. And I'm probably going to pick up Mariota right now. The guy before me from Scouts talking about Mariota. I don't really like him, but it's a QB2, and they also match up well. So
right.
When Luck's on a bye, Mariota has like Cowboys or something. Like it's a decent matchup, like he can do some things in there. But yeah, if you want to draft, especially in the IR spot, you can draft 3 tight ends. It's all up to the bench. It's all up to the IR spot. I don't like Tyler Eifert though, but I do what I do. I got Gesicki and Ricky Seals-Jones, so I think those guys are high upside guys. I think Ricky Seals-Jones is going to be suspended, maybe 2 games at most for that bathroom incident.
Look, that sounds pretty sketchy. I think he might not. I think nothing might happen to him.
Probably nothing, but I like to cover my
tracks. This is a serious need for number 2, and damn it, he was very polite about it, and it just had to happen, or it was going to happen. So anyhow, first question from the viewers out there is, how long did it take to grow that beautiful beard of yours? I'm also interested.
Like 4 months.
That's not bad. That's pretty impressive. Other than Freeman, which rookie running backs do you? That was, I think, for Doc. But kind of rank me through your rookie running backs right now. How you view them?
Well, you got who's number 1? Saquon. I'm drafting Saquon about 6, 7, 8 overall. About 7 overall. That's where I'm taking him. Huge believer in him. I don't want to get rid of this, but I'll just sum it up really quick. I like Rojo. I feel like I think he's a decent floor, decent upside. Just that Bucks team.
Late too.
That Bucks team is messy, but the talent is there. Like he's the one guy I love to see run. Like he is so amazing, and he will be, at least first, second. He will be the starter. But where you're getting him, round 6 is crazy.
Exactly.
Crazy. And then I like Nyheim Hines. And I said, I did a video. I said, who's the next Kamara? And he was number 1 at my list. And look, I know there may never be a next Kamara. And I'm just putting a percentage chance on there. Now, going back to reality, I think he's going to be what Darren Sproles was on that Saints. I think it's a realistic upside for Hines. And in a PPR league, I love that. Right now, he's going round 9, but you can get him round 11 in a lot of leagues.
I talked to Nyheim Hines about a month or 2 ago, and he is so eager to do anything. And remember, he's played wide receiver. He's carried the load at running back. He can return kicks. I think in that backfield, and this kind of brings up a next question for me. You look at the Colts backfield, and there are others like this. Let's say Green Bay, for an example. You look at in Indianapolis, maybe you have Marlon Mack and maybe Jordan Wilkins splitting the early down work. And you have Hines maybe with a more steady role. The same with Green Bay. You've got Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams battling for one spot. Jones got the suspension coming, but when he comes back, then you have Ty Montgomery in round 10 with the defined role. How do you feel about situations like that?
The Packers scares me. So I don't know. I think the Packers is like, if we knew there was one running back, that's a first round pick right there, though. And you can't say that about every team. You just can't. So the upside's there, but that scares me. I just think.
So do you maybe lay off the 2 guys that are going to that have the uncertainty, and if you want a piece, you go with Montgomery in round 10, 11, 12 or something as a potential value play, knowing that if you need a guy on a week, he's probably not going to get you a 0.
Yeah, I mean it's case by case, and the Packers, they scare me.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. How bad do the Raiders scare you?
I drafted Doug Martin. And I read Roto World, and it's like he's looking good, he's doing good, and I said no, I don't believe it. I drafted Doug Martin, but that's like my last pick, and it's just like you got to get that RB depth, just in case something happens to Lynch or something.
I do say that, I look at running backs like Marshawn Lynch and Isaiah Crowell. Look, I'm not thrilled with them, but when you're in the 7th and 9th round, and I see a guy that's first in line for opportunities in offenses that maybe, especially the Jets, they're going to need to rely on the run. Crowell's going to be very busy. What do you feel about a guy like that in the 9th round, and maybe Marshawn Lynch in the 7th round?
Don't draft the Crow. I don't like the Jets running backs. The Raiders, I don't like, but I can tolerate them. The Jets are just disgusting. I'm going to just avoid that. It just sounds, like bring out the caution tape, bring out the danger. The Jets sound bad. Disaster waiting to happen. Raiders, though, yes, if they fall, draft a Raider. For a Jets running back, they'd have to fall quite a bit.
We're talking to Hussein the Brain. Follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Couch. Then you can find all his YouTubery and such like, all that kind of festivities. And I highly recommend that. And you can see him on Football Diehards as well. So that brings us to Seattle's backfield. Everyone's in on, Rashad Penny. They put the draft capital in there. They bring in Brian Schottenheimer, the run heaviest offensive coordinator, not named Brian Dable in the NFL right now. And now we're hearing Chris Carson is all of a sudden the best running back in the world again. What do you do with that backfield, knowing that investment in Penny, hearing the talk about Carson, and thinking about the offensive line there, which isn't great. Not as bad as people think, but not great.
I'd probably describe it a little different than you just did, but the same point as you're torn. Rashad Penny, very explosive, a lot of hype. I hyped him up. I like him. Coming, before he got drafted, the Seattle reach for him. That O-line sucks. They drafted a tight end. I don't know his name, but he can block.
Will Dissly.
The one that can block a little bit.
Will Dissly.
Okay, so he can block a little bit. And Russell Wilson's good, and Rashad Penny can catch. And then you got CJ Prosise, one of the most injury-prone players. So I'm very torn. All I can say is that Rashad Penny, I believe, is being drafted a little too early, according to ADP. But I can't really go off that because things change day by day. Like Dion Kane. You know what I mean? Like he probably wasn't drafted 4 days ago, and now people are drafting him.
Right. This was the basis of my entire talk to start this program on Saturday, was not look down the drinking straw, right? I mean, we're gonna hear in training camp guys daily, this guy is fantastic. It's one day, people.
Oh, your news thing, that news segment? Right. I caught. That's the only part I watched. I was like, it's like this summit looks pretty dope.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's an issue that we all have. We look down that drinking straw. We hear about a player having a great day. It's one day. It's training camp. It's not like you have to put all this in context of the entire offseason and maybe even beyond in some of the cases like this. But I want to get a couple more opinions on some specific situations from you. Alex Collins, a guy that was, minimum, didn't come in till late, ended up the 11th in the league in rushing. Looks like he's the guy. I don't see, Kenneth Dixon's hurt again already. Don't look down the drinking straw, but this goes back a little ways. His availability is not Kenneth Dixon's best ability. What do you think, if you don't think Joe Flacco and the passing attack is going to be go great guns, and maybe you do, but what do you think about Alex Collins?
Alex Collins is like a young LeGarrette Blount. Like, I love how he runs, but he's not that talented. Like, you have to look deeper. Yes, he is the workhorse, but he's not that talented. He doesn't catch a lot of passes. And I think what you're going to really have to think about is how many touchdowns is this offense going to score? Is this O-line going to be back to where it was? Because we know the Ravens O-line has good potential, should I say is the right word? But are they going to get back there? Huge question marks. I pretty much avoid Alex Collins in PPR leagues, and that's usually about where I don't even care about wide receivers that much, but that's usually when I go for a tight end or a wide receiver when other people are desperately trying to draft Alex Collins. Now, if that team's going to score as many touchdowns as the Patriots did in 2015 or whatever when Blount was balling, then Alex Collins is amazing. But he's just a one-cut, up-the-gut type guy. I mean, nothing special.
Kenyan Drake, a believer or not?
I think he'll be the starter for at least majority of the year. So that means he's good, not great. It's some risk there.
Right. Yeah. Los Angeles Chargers, tight ends continue to go down at an alarming rate there. Maybe they sign Antonio Gates, not the same guy he once was, even if they do sign him, is Mike Williams. If you're playing best ball and you're at the end of the draft, are you looking for someone with a big body to take that red zone role? Or is that something Keenan Allen's going to take over? I see you, brother.
The Chargers are cursed, man. They're cursed. It's real. I've been saying it since the first time. They're cursed. I do love Mike Williams, though. He's a guy I target in every draft. I don't know. That's all I got. Was that it? Was that just the Mike Williams question?
It was basically because if you think he can handle that red zone role, not a huge body, but 6'2", 6'3", 200 plus pounds.
I absolutely love him. I love him in all aspects. I think he has all the potential, and it's funny because some leagues, I don't hate Corey Davis. I like Corey Davis, but
right. I was going to ask you. I was going to spin off on it. Go ahead.
I just saw him go round 5, too early for my taste. So I'd rather go, and Mike Williams now. I think his ADP is going to go up here. I mean, who else is going to be there, man? You got to go. The tight end's hurt. A lot of wide receivers are gone. Keenan Allen, I believe he'll stay healthy. I don't believe he's as injury prone as people make him out to be, but he still has the injury factor, though. I mean, you're not going to, So I love some of them are,
look, I profess to be injury agnostic as much as I can, and when with a guy like Allen, I'm cutting him slack. It was a lacerated kidney, for crying out loud. That doesn't happen every day.
Rare injury.
Right. Doesn't happen every day. So I kind of don't put that knock against him. Going back to Green Bay, we all want a piece of that offense. Can Jimmy Graham become a big body in the red zone in Green Bay like he did in the past? Aaron Rodgers, the Mike McCarthy offense, they like the seam splitter at that position. But do they have room? And what does that do to a guy like Davante Adams?
I don't think it affects Davante Adams as much. And I know this is crazy, guys, but a lot of Packers fans tell me Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback of all time. And I think he's great. And I really got to appreciate Aaron Rodgers when I didn't see him play. I mean, that team, they hit the brakes. They stopped. And with Aaron Rodgers back there, that guy is a magic maker. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, the NFL was different. It wasn't the same without Aaron Rodgers. He's one of the stars of the NFL. And I think Jimmy Graham's going to be good. Injury concern, yeah. He's not quite he basically was a wide receiver. He's not quite that before, but Aaron Rodgers, man, look at sometimes tight ends ball. I remember Richard Rodgers or whoever that was. He balled out a little bit one year. Where's that guy? He's not doing much. It's like
he's in Carolina right now, I think.
Third string tight end,
or Jacksonville, or somewhere down there. Gary Davenport would like to stop talking Mike Williams. And I do want to get to one more situation, then we'll give away Brandon Marianne Lee from Fantasy Alarm standing by in the green room, my good friend waiting to come on. So we'll close out with your quick impression on the top 4 running backs. Everyone loves the 4 guys. Where are you at? You got an order for them, and just or do you even care? Is it like is it a dart toss in those first 4?
That's a good point. I'm going Gurley number 1 in a standard league. I can see Zeke going number 1. And then I got Le'Veon Bell, just because of I don't quite the situation's not 100% there. I still believe Lev Bell's gonna ball out. And then I got DJ around number 4. Not a good O-line, but he's the type of running back that can make that O-line look decent.
Yeah, Mike McCarthy, a very pass-heavy guy, is type of offensive coordinator, and that's going to play into the hands of both Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald, who's still pretty good, apparently, right? You all in on that?
I just drafted him, so I hope.
Right. We got 2 accurate passers there, whoever the quarterback is, whether it's Bradford or Josh Rosen. They're both fairly accurate passers, works into the big spot.
I can complete a few passes to Fitzgerald. That guy's amazing. He's probably easy to get along with, too, that guy, probably.
All right, that's our guy. Hussein the Brain, follow him at Fantasy Couch. You love the 10 commandments of drafting. They were phenomenal, sir. Thank you very much. Feel free to hang around in the chat if you have a few minutes, and I'm sure people have questions for you. If not, everyone look for him on Twitter and hit him up. He's a great guy.
YouTube. Check me out on the YouTubes. Peace.
That too. All right, everybody. So I'm going to reset a little bit here just real quickly before we bring in Brandon. Had Evan Tarciano to start the night. He's on. You can follow him on Twitter at RotoWizard. Dr. Roto, great with his visionary draft strategy. Love that. You can follow him on Twitter at Dr. Roto, DRROTO. And you can find him at Scout Fantasy. And then, of course, Hussein the Brain, the Fantasy Couch, at Fantasy Couch. And you can follow him on YouTube as well, where he talks all the time and does the same kind of stuff. Great job by him. And with that, let's bring up my good friend, Brandon Marianne Lee from the Fantasy Alarm. I want to let everyone know at the bottom of this, at the end of this segment, which is the bottom of the hour, we have to take the mandatory break after 2 hours. So it's a hard break, computer generated. So once Brandon gets down there, I'm going to jump in to make sure we don't get cut off. But when that happens, you just go ahead and stay in the chat room, stay where you're at. The site will reload for you, and you'll come right back. And just a quick reminder of what we've got ahead. If you can stick around tomorrow, we've got Tuesday night. We start again at 8:30 Eastern time. We'll have Armando Marsal of Football Diehards come in, talk about draft strategy and in-season management. Casey Joyner from ESPN at 9. We'll have Bobby Gomez for DFS, Armando Marsal again at 10 p.m. Jen Ryan talking DFS and gambling techniques after that at 10:30. And then Jeff Mans from Guru Elite will close out the night. And I hear the shuffling of papers and such like as. Brandon, are you there?
I am. Hello. Can you hear me?
I hear you great. I don't see you so well, though.
Oh, hold on. Life is happening over and over again.
It does that. I hate that part. Brandon Marianne Lee, if you don't know her, you find her work at the Fantasy Alarm. She does a great job there, a lot of video work there, and on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. She is a rising star in the world of fantasy. She's really come on strong, making fast strides. And we can hear you, Brandon, but we cannot see you yet. So we're
okay. Hold on. My apologies, you guys. Well,
no apologies necessary. We know you're there.
For a minute. We'll chat, life is happening.
We know you're there. And you all were chatting. If you want to go throw out what you got. By the way, you can follow her on Twitter at BrandonHerFFB. And again, follow her on the alarm if you can. And we've got a picture up, Brandon, if you want to kick off. I know you're going to talk about, this is something that she writes about every year in the Football Diehards magazines, the draft book. And it's like how to look at statistics and things in a pragmatic way and make sound, logical decisions. Don't draft on your emotions. Brandon, if you want to get started, we'll keep working on the picture for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So pragmatic drafting, pragmatic decision-making, adding context to fantasy football. These are all things that are incredibly important. And so while I'm also trying to get my jam going here with the lovely connection here. As you were saying, I am the co-founder of Her Fantasy Football, which is how I actually got into fantasy football. And what's interesting is that we were the first ever all-female fantasy sports podcast, period, like on the planet, which was weird, first of all, but true. And one of the things is that people used to really like the fact that it was all just kind of no nonsense, right? And so people would say, you guys have such different takes. You know, way out there. You're not with this group thing. But really, and people thought, oh, well, is it because they're women? Well, no, it was not because we're women. It is actually because we share the same DNA. They were my real sisters. And I actually really learned that we think a lot alike more than anything else. And so it was intriguing to talk about that. And one of the things that we do is we're very logical people. So I'm going to go through logical ways to draft your fantasy football leagues with a way that you're not giving into the hype. You're not making sure that you're just making sure that everything that you're doing makes sense. So And again, apologies here, you guys. Is there some place that I should go and I'm not seeing what you guys are saying? We might as well just take a second.
You're great. We can hear everything you're saying. We just can't see you. I don't know. It seems like it might be on your end, but if you want to keep the presentation going, I can bring up questions if you can't see them, and you can call me out if you need if you need me to jump in with questions. Or if you want to take a minute to figure out the camera, I can take some questions from the crowd. Whatever works for you, Brandon.
Well, why don't you take some questions from the crowd? I can see the questions on the side, though. So hello, everybody. There's Dave. This has been years now. Calling you couch to couch. Yes. And couch, you know what? I did have you, fantasy couch guy, on our podcast. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. And yes, SiriusXM, it's Her Fantasy Football. Yes, absolutely. So thank you. Thanks, Dave. Nice to see you too. So, I am going to let Bob take a couple questions. I'm going to just try to fix this video thing real quick and see if I can.
All right, and I do have a couple questions here that I'll run through. How is the Houston offensive line a threat to Deshaun Watson's production and health? Look, Deshaun Watson's a dynamic player. I think he has the movement, the ability. He was playing behind a not fantastic offensive line last year and was very productive, right? So he uses his mobility a lot. And I remember the ACL injury happened in practice, but he was jogging off the field, right? So don't panic about that. If you were looking to draft him, I would say don't overpay for him. Maybe don't expect those 34 points a game. that you got last year from the Houston offense. But no, Brandon's working on her camera right now, so give it a second and we'll see how she goes.
I am personally very low on Deshaun Watson.
Right, and so like kind of run through that. I mean, is it just the fact that people are overpaying for him, or do you feel like it's not going to be a great season?
I feel like it's both. In terms of his accuracy, there were only 2 quarterbacks that played in at least 25% of their team snaps that had a lower accuracy rate than Deshaun Watson. That was Deshaun Kaiser and Drew Stanton. Everyone else is more accurate than Deshaun Watson. That's a fact. That's nuts, people. That's nuts. Also, he had 5 amazing games, but we forget the first 2 games that were terrible. And in the second game, if he hadn't broken out for that one big 60-yard run, he would have had no fantasy points whatsoever. It was really, really, really bad. So I think he's better than that, obviously. We saw like flashes of genius. There is no doubt about that. And I'm not a moron, okay? I mean, there's a possibility he's going to be great. But in a year where you could wait until your 12th round to take a quarterback, why on earth would you take Deshaun Watson in the 4th round? I'm just confused by the concept.
So are you saying Will Fuller is not going to catch a touchdown once every 7.1 attempts to his way, targets?
Listen, I am a Will Fuller girl. I love him if I can get him in the 9th round like I just did here at the Pros versus Joes on the FFPC. Like, listen, I do all sorts of contests, and every contest is completely different. If I can get a guy who can, in a best ball format, have a huge game like that every once in a while, absolutely. But in your regular fantasy leagues, are you ever going to feel comfortable starting him every single week or making that decision? Right? I mean, that's one of the things too, in terms of, So I do not have slides. Emil just asked me. I was actually going to show you my paperwork. So unfortunately, you guys can't see it. So I'm trying to figure out why on earth I'm not being shown here. But anyway, we're going to keep it going, you guys, because you know what? The show goes on. The show goes on. So I'm going to do the presentation like you guys can see me, and my apologies that you can't. And I have no idea.
Oh, we might have just lost you all together by connection, and we did. Let's get her hooked back up here. You know, technical stuff happens, people. Let me just go through some of the questions.
Yeah, go for it.
And there she is. She's back. Still no picture, but hooked back up. Brandon.
I thought that would help the picture.
That did not help the picture. But go ahead. You were getting ready to run through and go through your presentation without the paperwork. And I know you're drafting right now. And I see the connection looks like it's gone again. Maybe some issues with the connection. All right, I'm going to take a quick question here. Is there any concern about regression with Larry Fitzgerald due to his age? I'm not sure that I have that concern. Look, you look at the way he's gone the last 3 years. It's been 3 straight years of 100-plus catches. Did you see signs of him slowing down? No. Would some regression surprise me? No. I mean, who has 400 catch seasons in a year? I mean, especially at that age. So I would say that, if you're looking at catching 110 passes again, yeah, maybe there's a little concern about regression. But for him to be a frontline player in that offense, which is going to be very pass heavy with Mike Michele running it, no. I hear you, Brandon. Are you there?
Yes, I am. I don't know. I apologize, but I am just really going to concentrate on
all right, we're having still some issues there. So having a hard time hearing you too, Brandon. So the question here is, rookie wide receivers are always a challenge. Do we see a breakout this year? Look, I think it's all about opportunities. I know people are looking at Michael Gallup as a guy that might have a chance to get in there. And I think that's true. There's not a lot else there in Dallas. You got Hurns, you've got Cole Beasley, you've got Terrence Williams. Terrence Williams, a great blocker, hasn't been great guns as a receiver, has flashed at moments. We know what Beasley is. Hurns is the most versatile weapon there. So I don't have a lot of hope. DJ Moore is obviously a guy that looks like he has the clearest path to workload. I think the static's gone. Are you there, Brandon?
Can you hear me?
I hear you perfectly clearly.
Hell. Okay.
I cannot see you, but we're going to work. If we got the sound,
exactly, you guys. It's much more important that I get through this presentation. And so my sincere apologies, but just know, you guys, I heart you, and we're all making it work here. So we're going to talk about pragmatic decision-making and adding context to fantasy football research. I was talking about using your common sense noggin, and I know that that sounds condescending and terrible, but we get so excited because we talk all summer long. And it's really fun now, too, because we're actually seeing people at practice doing their thing, but we've talked all summer long. So it's so easy to get swept up in narratives, swept up in what's going on, and you don't actually look at the facts that are surrounding the circumstance. One of the best examples of that is audio super crisp. Thank you. One thing's going well today. Yes. I was like, I promise I'm in my very professional setting right now. I cleaned up behind me so that it looked pretty, you guys. It's really, you're all missing out. So what I was going to say, though, is that last year, her fantasy football in general, especially my sister Ashley, but all of us were off of Joe Mixon. And I want to talk about the thought process that went behind that instead of people acting like that was some sort of weird hot take to make noise. It was not. So one of the things that happened that we're all here at camp right now and people are showing up or they're not showing up is that he showed up at camp 20 pounds over the weight that he played in college. And the team was ticked off. Okay, so they said he's going to have to compete. He's out of shape. They called him out immediately. Now, I'm not saying that you need to listen to narratives, but here's the problem. Again, add the context. This guy was already a risky draft pick. They stuck their neck out for him, and then he shows up 20 pounds overweight. And you go, okay, well, that's not a good sign. So then what happens? Well, he goes into camp. He's doing okay. But we realize their offensive line is actually worse than what we thought. Okay. So we realize that they are having injuries. They can't work together. Everything's looking bad. Well, the problem is that Joe Mixon as a player is known as a talent who is like Le'Veon Bell. He has patience. He waits for the hole to appear and then he hits it and he makes magic happen. Well, the problem was the hole was never going to appear because he played for the Cincinnati Bengals. So his strengths could not be utilized in this offense. So you take into consideration the fact that he was out of shape. And that's not debatable. I mean, he's talking about it like ad nauseum right now. And then we've got the fact that there is no hole that's ever going to appear. And the whole team is sort of in shambles. So where was he going to get those fantasy points? Also, and let's be honest here, Giovanni Bernard did better in every single metric than Joe Mixon last year. He is still on the team today, but certainly last year with him being a rookie, showing up overweight, not having the kind of people around him that could showcase his skill set, that's why we said there's no way this guy should be going in the third or fourth round. So what you need to do when you hear certain things is say, is this piece of news, is this nugget connected to something else? That's context. Is there an offensive line issue? Is there an off the field issue? Is there a risk issue? What have you? And so that's how you can develop your own sense of whether or not you believe someone will outperform or underperform the expectations set by the groupthink. And that's not being hot takey. It's putting it in context. Do you have any questions about that, Bob, since I can't show you anything here?
No, I think, again, you are speaking my language here when you're talking about context. I'm going, But please carry forward. I think this is making perfect sense here as you go along. So, yeah, continue with the pragmatism.
Fantastic. So one of the other things that I do is that I always draft in tiers. But more importantly, I make sure that every position other than kicker and defense is on the same sheet of paper, and I always print it out. Why? Because there is a scientific connection between your hand and when you handwrite versus when you type. There is a scientific backing that actually, if you're someone that journals with your hand, it will be better ingrained in your memory, and you will have more resolution with whatever you're writing about if you do it by hand rather than digitally. There is just a science to the hand and brain connection, which is what athletes already know, right? I mean, it's all also psychological and physical. right? So I make sure that I print out every single draft sheet. All of those positions are right next to each other on that cheat sheet so that I wish I could show you this cheat sheet because I was going to say, listen, I'm just completing a draft now and I could show you exactly what it is. So I highlight the players that I have. I cross out the ones that I don't, which sounds so elementary. But do you know how few people actually do that work? It is unbelievable how many times I'm in a draft and people are there without a cheat sheet and are just kind of like doing it half. And we're getting into this best ball mentality where we just kind of like, have 8-hour clocks and I'll just take the best player that's there at the top of my queue and everything's fine. And we're not thinking about strategy. And I think that takes away from your advantage if you just sit there and kind of like, half focus on the draft. So I'm a very focused person. Also science has told us that multitasking is kind of a bunch of BS and that we're not good at it. Yeah, there it is. Science. Exactly. The thing is that I like to focus on what I am doing. And I don't like to have my focus everywhere else, which is why, frankly, I'm not a huge fan of 8-hour drafts. And I know that I'm kind of alone on that. But you know what I do to combat that? I make sure that I have all of my cheat sheets for my 8-hour drafts and I keep them with me, which sounds a little crazy, but let me tell you, it works. And I just have them right there in the notebook that's always in my bag. And I just check it and I'm like, okay, what was this? Because also if I'm doing 5 drafts at a time with 8-hour time clocks, I cannot possibly keep track of all of those drafts. I can't do it because I also have a life. I'm a human being. My dogs need food. Things happen. And then I go, I forgot. I already drafted a Denver Broncos wide receiver. I probably shouldn't have done 2. And that happens because we're doing 5 million things. So stop doing that. Also, what I was going to say is that let's talk a little bit about the pragmatism of after the draft, which I don't think we talk enough about in fantasy, which is that when you are deciding who you want to drop for picking up someone on waivers, I am imploring you to check their snap counts. Not just their amount of points that they scored that week, but it is incredibly important to see the snap counts. Because someone that you may have believed in all year maybe didn't have a big week 1, but if they were on the field for 70% of the snaps, there's a good chance they're going to do it week 2. Now, someone could just have a big play and catch one pass and go for 60 yards and a touchdown and have this killer week, and they were only on the field for 10% of the snaps. Now, their snaps might go up because they've proven something, but the point is that when you're deciding on these things, look at the snap count, see how much they are on the field. If there's a huge disparity, pause. Also, this is how you could have avoided dropping Odell Beckham. If you have a guy who hasn't played yet, do not drop him from your roster. You drafted him for a reason. If he does play and he's only in 10% of the snaps, that's the guy you want to drop. So that's how you make those tough decisions in weeks 1 through 3 when we're just not quite sure. And that way you're not sitting there going, oh no, I just let someone else take Odell Beckham. I didn't know he'd be the guy once he got healthy. And instead you can drop one of those guys that it just didn't work out. Also, when I'm looking at snap counts, it's a good way to know whether or not you can trust someone and their productivity. And I'm going to use poor Derrick Henry as an example. Unless DeMarco Murray's dead, Derrick Henry never played in more than 46% of those team snaps. That's why he was an incredibly inconsistent, difficult fantasy prospect. There's a possibility that that happens again this year with Dion Lewis. We're going to see the snap counts. We don't have them yet, but we're going to see them. But I would still, at the end of the season, get questions about, should I start Dion Lewis or Derrick Henry, ironically? But Dion Lewis was killing it and on the field all the time. And I was like, no, you can't. You have to go with Dion Lewis. If you're looking at these guys, it is a telltale sign what's going on when you look at the snap counts. And you can get snap counts at a lot of different sites now. People are adding that as a perk to your fantasy knowledge because they realize that it is such an important aspect of the game. In terms of what other kind of metrics that I look at, I do look at a lot of Pro Football Focus stuff. I love the yards after contact. I know a lot of other people have that too. I look at yards after the catch, which to me is a sign of productivity for that particular wide receiver. And then, just also keep it simple, stupid. If they're getting a ton of carries and a ton of targets, believe that. It's amazing to me how many people say, oh, but I don't know. And here's the other thing. And this was my Amari Cooper thing. If you have a wide receiver getting a ton of volume, but he's catching less than 50% of their passes, trade them while their value is high. It's a very easy watermark. If they cannot hit it, I don't care if they're getting 12 targets, they're not going to get that for long. And we saw that with Amari Cooper. And I kept telling people early, I was like, get out now. And that's why catch rate does matter, especially when it comes to the quarterbacks and whether or not they trust them. I see a lot of nodding and things there. I want to engage you, Bob.
I'm loving this. Engage me all you need. I'm a huge fan, and I'm just sitting here rapt at attention because, look, a lot of the things you say, I totally agree with. Snap counts. Look, there's a lot of people who are draft nicks and, understand all that. I'm an opportunity nick. I'm interested in who's getting the ball, where they're getting the ball. I know at many sites, Pro Football Focus, Fantasy Alarm, Football Diehards, we have, red zone stats trending over the recent weeks. And you watch those trends, like the last 3 weeks is what I like to look at, the previous 3 weeks, and see where guys are at. But that snap count, if they're not on the field, it's not working. And I think we draft a lot of guys. What did you want to ask me? Because I do have some questions from the crowd when you're ready for them.
I'm ready for questions now. Let's go for it.
Okay, there's one that I started to answer when you came back, but I wanted to go a little more in depth. Rookie wide receivers, always a challenge. Do you see any of them breaking out this year?
Yes. I actually spoke about this at the FSTA when we did the big first draft of the season and whatnot. I think that Michael Gallup has the easiest route to being the number one target on his team. I think DJ Moore is an interesting prospect. My only problem with DJ Moore is that he's going to be behind Greg Olsen at bare minimum, if not also Christian McCaffrey. So he's not going to be the number one target per se, although he might be the number one wide receiver. I think there's a possibility Michael Gallup straight up is the number one target period on the Dallas Cowboys. So that is intriguing to me. I don't usually target them much, although if they're still available, I like them. That's kind of where I'm at. Is that, double digit rounds.
Expecting a breakout, seems like a bit of a dice shoot. I do think, DJ Moore has the clearest path to a workload, but I might agree with you that, given what the situation in Dallas, but I think it's going to take a lot for Gallup to get there. There was another question I was answering as you were going through the difficulties, and I find it very interesting, a question about Larry Fitzgerald regression. Look, when a guy has 3 straight 100-catch seasons at his age, some regression is not that horrible. I could think of worse things. How much regression would you expect, if any, though, Brandon?
I'm sorry, for whom? I'm sorry, just cut out.
Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah, very little. The only thing that I'm kind of sad about is that last year he was so discounted and now he's going rather high.
Nice.
Yeah, you have to pay for Larry Fitz. So I'm not quite sure. To me, I haven't had Larry Fitz in any of my drafts yet because he's kind of going in a weird place right now where I'm also doing rookie running backs, which I'm a little higher on a lot of them than a lot of other people. So I'm kind of going that route instead of Larry Fitzgerald, but I can't blame you for wanting to go with Larry Fitzgerald. I think what the regression is going to be is that I think David Johnson should be the number one overall pick this year.
Tell me more.
Yeah, I just think that, he was only 6 yards. He had only 6 less receiving yards in 2016 than Devontae Adams had in 2017. That's insane. Right. And then he also had 1,200 rushing yards on top of that. That's
right.
bananas.
The 1,000 is not totally unrealistic. It seems like a very tough haul. But again, with Mike McCoy, pass-heavy play caller, I think that's a good situation. I have another question here from the crowd. How do you think Jarvis Landry will work out in Cleveland? What the hell is going to happen in Cleveland? I mean, the whole Josh Gordon thing clouds the issue to some degree. And the quarterback situation maybe to some degree. But Landry, the little talk that he's going to play on the outside. I know Mike Clay was a little dismissive of that. Still be plenty of the 11 formations, 3 receiver sets. So your thoughts on Landry?
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous having him on the outside. Why would you put one of the best slot receivers of all time? Like literally, he has the most catches in the first 4 years of any person in the National Football League in history. And then you're like, you know what? Let's just change it up in Cleveland. It's just dumb. Right. So I think he'll be great, though. I think Jarvis Landry's an incredible athlete. I think he's an incredible football player. I think the hate has gone way too far. The fact that he's been this productive with Ryan Tannehill and Jay Cutler and Matt Moore, I mean, give me a break. Can you name anyone who's a wide receiver other than my boy DeAndre Hopkins who has had that kind of peril and has still succeeded? Unbelievable.
Yeah, we have Gary Davenport, a longtime Cleveland Browns fan, in the chat, and obviously we're making him cry just by mentioning the entire thing. The entire Cleveland Browns. Something I asked Hussein, and I'm interested in because I see it a lot. Brandon, in situations, and the pragmatist in you made this will be a great question. I see backfields, and the Green Bay is the one that comes right to mind. You've got two guys who are likely to split the early down work. You've got a third guy, and this is maybe the same in Cleveland with Chubb and Hyde and Johnson. In Green Bay, you've got the two Williams, Jones, and then you've got Ty Montgomery. Are you comfortable just waiting on the later guy and drafting, the Montgomery in the 10th or 12th round, or the other guys late? Or do you want to take a chance on one of those early down pounders and hope you pick the right one?
Well, I feel like their ADPs are still all in the double digits, so I'm fine with taking your shot and hoping that you got the one. I'm also fine with you in week 3 saying, yeah, I'm out on this and dropping one. I mean, or trading one to someone who, listen, there are a lot of Aaron Jones truthers out there. He probably has the highest trade value. I personally think Jamal Williams is going to get the ball more than anyone else. And I think Ty Montgomery just gets the sickle cell trait thing really bothers me, worries me, I should say. It doesn't bother me. I'm not angry at him. Obviously, that's a sickness. But my point is that I also know that it's a sickness that makes it very difficult to heal. So when he does get hurt, it just is harder for him to come back. And I don't want to wait that long. So for me, that's a very technical thing that holds me back. But you know what? Tevin Coleman's been a great fantasy asset, also has sickle cell trait. So it doesn't always work out that way. It's just for me, I'm a little risk adverse for that particular trait because I just know a lot about it. So, but I will say this. I think that when there's a backfield that has so much potential to be near an end zone, it's hard to not try to get one piece of it and hope for the best in the double digit rounds. That's how I do it.
What committees are you avoiding?
I'm trying not to touch the Jets, which I think it's going to be Isaiah Crowell straight up. But if there's a rumbling of a committee, there's just no way. Again, I'm not quite sure they're going to get near an end zone, which is one of the more difficult things for me. And Indianapolis, I also am not quite sure Andrew Luck is healthy. I mean, we'll
see about that. We're going to find out on the first exhibition game. We're going to all get our first really good look at him and serious look. And by the way, I want to remind everybody in here that at the bottom of the hour, in exactly 4 minutes or a little under 4 minutes, this chat is going to shut down. The site forces us to take a break. You will remain in the chat, remain logged in. It will start back up in 30 seconds, and we'll go on to the next segment. I'd also, before it gets too late and I get cut off, I think I want to make sure we thank Brandon for being a badass and battling through the technical issues and still delivering the goods. And we still have a few more questions for you, Brandon, if you don't mind.
Oh, no, please.
Right. And I guess, the run, some of the committees that we all hate are, we don't like what we're seeing in Tennessee. We never like what we're seeing in New England. But there's another one. I asked Hussein the Brain about it. The Seattle Seahawks. What are you doing with Rashad Penny? Does the Chris Carson talk worry you, or is it just the preseason talk that we should all be used to at this point?
I think it's just preseason talk, but you always have to prepare yourself for the worst, of course. But I think it would be absurd for them not to utilize Rashad Penny's skill set, which is yards after contact, which is one of the things that I said I'm most impressed with. He had the absolute most yards after contact, most of the highest elusive rating, what have you, out of any running back coming out of the draft this year. That includes Saquon Barkley. He's going to need to use that skill set in Seattle due to their problems on the offensive line. So I don't know why they wouldn't do that. I think Chris Carson's a great guy. He had a little pop. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to let Rashad Penny go. By the way, Rashad Penny can still be the number one back, and Chris Carson still have some big games. It's not like these are mutually exclusive.
Right, this is true. There's some other running backs we haven't touched on tonight, and I want to get to. Kerryon Johnson. I look at the Detroit Lions. They bring in Matt Patricia, defensive-minded coach. Maybe he wants to run the ball. You look at the things they've done with the offensive line, more athletic, more physical, and yet he's still a Detroit running back, and people are laying off him. He's kind of the Paul Perkins of this year's draft, one of the last guys that looks like a lead back that's going off the boards. Your thoughts on him?
Well, I like him. I would love for Detroit to have another running back that hits 1,000 yards. I mean, could you imagine? Could you imagine? It's like a whole new world out there. I thought it was going to be Kerryon Johnson. Then they put him on, they were like, oh, we're going to do kick returns. So I'd like him to definitely get on the field. I still think that he's going to have a little bit of a ceiling issue based on the fact they're going to want to pass a lot. But I also could see them use LeGarrette Blount. I know no one wants to hear that coming out of my mouth, but listen, the Lions, I have a lot of question marks about that offense. Also, having a defensive-minded coach now, they're going to try to not air it out as much, supposedly, but that's really Matthew Stafford's game. And they have the pieces to do that.
Right?
Yeah.
And Jim Bob Cooters as well. So
yeah, so
I'm kind of with you there. All right. Brandon Marianne Lee, follow her on Twitter at Brandon, her FFB. Listen to her on the SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Go to Fantasy Alarm. She does tons of good videos, and her camera comes on, and we don't block her. I apologize for that, Brandon.
No,
but I totally appreciate you battling through it.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me. And go to fantasyalarm.com/Brandon. And if you enter Brandon, you can get a discount off of the draft guide. Thank you.
Do it. All right, everybody, 10 seconds away. The site's going to shut down. The video is going to shut down. Everything else will be there, and we'll be back in about 30 seconds after it shuts down in 3, 2, 1.
We got everybody back. Emil Cadlick. And Skip is bringing up Bob here in a moment. And it's actually my next time to do a presentation, so I'm going to get my thing up here in a minute, but we're going to get Bob in a couple minutes. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Brandon Lee visually, but it was a great talk. Learned a lot. This has been a fantastic day today. I hope I can keep up my part here in a couple of minutes. So Bob's coming in a minute here.
Not seeing Bob in the stream yet.
All right. We don't have Bob yet, but hopefully he'll be here quickly. All right, Bob is there now. You see him?
You're not seeing him yet. He's reloading the screen.
He's reloading the screen. Sorry, everyone. Here we are live, and we're chit-chatting about how to get this stuff done. Today, I'm going to be talking about draft strategy. We've had some fantastic draft strategies here this day so far, and I've learned a lot actually from them, and I hope to teach a little bit also myself. I'm going to start getting my draft prep up here while we wait for Bob. Let me hit a couple buttons. And let's see, let's go in here. Oh, look at that. So, okay. All right. I think what I may do is just start going, and we'll get Bob in a minute. And I think Bob's coming up. Let's wait on Bob here. All right. We're going to get going. So my talk is about Stomp. It's a draft strategy we created here at Football Diehards last year. We've had a lot of draft strategies, but I thought it would be good to try and really come up with a tool and some concepts to help people. It's named for strategic targeting of ADP mapping. We've talked a lot about ADP today and in the last couple of days. Cute acronym, I know we didn't, it's funny, but at the same time it means something. Basically what we're doing here is using ADP to guide us to create a map, a plan for your rounds of your drafts. And you've got a lot of options to pick here. Let me go to the next view graph and you can see that. Okay, I've got it flipped here so you can see it. So basically what you've got some league information, which is how many rounds, where your position is, and you've got some options on your ADP. You can use low stakes. You can go with high stakes. There's an ESPN ADP for you playing the ESPN leagues. And depending on which one you pick, there's quite a variety of where players go in the ADP. So it's important to get the one that matches you to get the best. So let's go to a C. Now, hopefully you can see this well. This kind of is a lot of stuff in one view graph. You see that big red arrow coming across. And at the very far left, it says managers. We're going to have an example here using 12 managers, 16 rounds, as you see. We're picking high stakes players, ADP. And on the far bottom left below managers, you got the draft slot. We're going to pick 9 in the draft slot. There's a thing called a safety zone, if you can see it. And right now I have set that at 2. And that's the number of picks that the system will look backwards or from what the ADP is. It's a safety zone. You know, you can put that at 0. You can put that at 6. You can put that at a whole round of 12. You know, I'm kind of tempted to put it at 0 and let your own mind decide what you want to do. Then you have third round reversal. The NFFC uses third round reversal, and this tool matches that. That's basically, if you haven't heard of that, you get the serpentine for the first 2 rounds. Then the third round repeats the second round, and then you get the normal serpentine after that. It's just a type of style, and this system covers that. Now, if you notice, under the targeted players in the middle, you've got the players on the left that you can add, and the players on the left that I've already added. I think I had about 9 people in there. You move them over, and you hit make player changes, and then you see how your map looks, and you may add or subtract. And let's go to the map. You can see it a little below, but here it is now. So the 9 players I picked, here they lay out in the draft. You've got the 9th pick, and as you notice, Calvin Cook is the first player you put way up high, and his ADP is 2.01. First pick in the second round. So Calvin Cook, you got to take him in the first round with the 9th pick. Let's say you had, well, you know, you're kind of stuck taking him unless you had the 12th pick or whatnot, and you could hope to get him around. So if you really like the guy, you're going to have to take him in the first with the 9th pick. Tyreek Hill doesn't work really well with the 9th pick. If you notice over there, his ADP is the 6th pick in the 3rd round, but you've got the 9th pick in the 3rd round. So if you really want him, you're going to have to take him in the 2nd or hope he gets to you. So this kind of helps you dash around the different picks you have in different drafts to kind of tell you, you know, what problems or what the smoother players are. We got a handful of players here in here. One of them that's interesting is Trey Burton. He's a late 9th round pick right now in high stakes. And this is telling us, the stomp map is telling us to take him in the 8th. We'll go back over this later after we go through some drafts. And Phillip Rivers right now, we have him as a 12th round pick. And Ben Watson's another interesting one. You've got, leave this out of the way. He's down at the 16th round. He's not going that high. He's a kind of a curious sleeper type guy that you can get pretty late. So let's go. Let's move on here. And one of the things I really like about the Stomp tool on the website is it puts, it bolds all the players that are in your targets, and it also reminds you of the round. If you notice there, Cook is Minnesota round 1, pick 1, or excuse me, R:1, which is round 1. And it's got Ronald Jones for Tampa Bay, round 4, a few other guys. So when you print that one-page cheat sheet, you've got those bolds for you. And if you end up, you know, getting flustered, you know, I'm old. I'm 61 years old. So when I'm drafting, sometimes I forget about stuff. It happens. And having those guys bolded on that one sheet, and you could print out the map also, but sometimes I lose it. I put my coffee on it. I forget where it is. And that one sheet, as you're marking players off, you may look down and go, oh, well, gosh, I forgot about Ronald Jones, or I remember about Trey Burton. And it's kind of really nice, a simple thing, but yet a very effective thing to add those bolds. All right. That was kind of how the web tool works, the Stomp web tool. Now we got some postulations, and we can go through things that had come up earlier today a couple times. And also Jeff Ratcliffe pointed it out yesterday, practice. It's something that is really important. Hussein the Brain mentioned it just an hour ago. You got to practice. It's something that, you know, sometimes you want to be lazy, but you really need to do it. Now, what we also, how do you practice? Well, we talked a lot, these previous guys talked a lot about free mocks, very important, yet they're limited. You want to start with free mocks, in my opinion. And if you can find some paid ones, I'm not really sure if they're out there, but it's going to get you going. It's going to get you in the flow of drafting and the hurry of it. And looking when things don't go your way, and you're looking at your stomp map and you're looking at your cheat sheet and you got your sleepers and what you're going to learn a little bit on how to make alterations, make changes, because as you know, that's how it happens. Now, so really, okay, the free mocks, that's great. It's a good start. It's a good way to get yourself loose. But we really recommend things like best ball leagues where, they're $10 a shot. And some people talked about there's other ones that are even cheaper. Those, even if you have normal leagues that you want to get into that are test leagues, but you want to do some testing in leagues that are real. In other words, people put money in them to play them. They're going to probably be drafted more accurately. So best ball leagues, you can get them cheap. You can even draft live ones now, so don't have to run the long 4 or 8 hours, but you could do those too. And do some of those depending on how much money you want to spend on it. But that really gives you a crisp draft where you can, most likely get quality picks from the other managers and allows you to practice more. Let's go to the next slide here. I got a lot of postulates. I got about 10 of them here that are just kind of glued together with the concept of the stomp and just good fantasy drafting practices. Roster goal is not talked about a lot, but like this test we're doing right here, it's a 16-round draft, and it's a good idea, in my opinion, to plan out your roster at the beginning, at least how many skill positions you think are smart for this league, etc. So in this example, we have 2 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 6 wide receivers, a tight end, a kicker, and a defense. And that's what we've planned this out. We think this is a good balance of skill positions. So as your draft starts up and you're doing your tests, you can start practicing to make sure that you've done your right thought process as it goes. Sometimes we get carried away. Let's say in the middle to late rounds, I got this running back on my list of targeting, or I've just thought of him or whatever. I really want him. I get all excited and I take him. And then 2 rounds later, I realize, oh my gosh, I only have 4 wide receivers. So I'm going to have to spend the next 2 picks at wide receivers, and that really nice running back I wanted to get in the 3rd to last round before my kicker and my defense, I can't take him. I've got to go with the 2 receivers. I didn't plan it out right. I got confused and I got excited. So you can't have all your sleepers, and sometimes they're not all there. But it's really good to look at that practice your roster goal, and understand as you're hitting those middle to late rounds, if I take one of these, am I going to lose a receiver or vice versa? And you're going to end up with a more well-tuned roster and the players that you want. All right, postulation 3, the theory of drafting relativity. I think it'll make sense here. What I hear a lot of people talk about early running back, late quarterback draft strategies. I'm actually a proponent of late quarterback strategies in most typical leagues. But as you know, even in the given year, from day to day, you may go into a draft today and go into a draft tomorrow that's very similar, and you're going to have changes in how people are taken. The players, the managers are taking players much differently in that draft versus this first draft. So you've got that random variance that goes on. That's kind of what I'm talking about, the relativity. And I'll give you a couple examples. Let's actually flip way back to the stomp tool. Hopefully you guys can see that. So let's say we're running along and I've got my quarterback strategy of late quarterback. So I'm going to take Phillip Rivers, and this is just an example, in the 12th round. I think I can get him there. His ADP is the 10th pick in the 12th. So I'm going to do this late quarterback draft strategy. And then all of a sudden, in round 8 or 9, Cam Newton's still there, or somebody that you really like, that you were really expecting to go in the 6th or 7th round, and all of a sudden he's there in the 9th. The relativity is that how this draft is coming out is quarterbacks are going slower. So I may at that point decide to just jump right up in that 8th round and take Cam Newton, because I really do like Cam Newton. I just didn't think he was going to be there. So that's the relativity. You have to be ready to adapt, and don't be stubborn that I'm going to get my quarterback. And the opposite can occur where it's the 7th, 8th, or 9th round, and all of a sudden 11 quarterbacks go, and one of them is Rivers. And now I'm sitting here waiting on somebody in the 12th but already in the eighth or seventh round, I've already gone through my guys. And so at that point, I may have to move up and draft another quarterback, or see this thing coming and move up instead of drafting at 12, drafting at 8 or 9 to get Phillip Rivers. So that's the draft theory relativity, and it can go both ways. But important to understand that just don't stick to your guns that I'm a 0 RB guy and I'm not going to draft any of these running backs. You really got to look at how the flow of the draft goes. All right, let's see. Stomp postulate 4. Another thing that a lot of people do, and I just think it's an important thing to emphasize, is using the draft board grids in commissioners. Most of the commissioners now have them, and they're very pretty, and they're easy to see. And if you can have one browser up or one tab up with how you draft your players and another tab or browser with the board, it makes a big difference. And here's an example, and pardon me, it's a early quarterback draft, so you got quarterbacks going early in this particular one, as an example. So you right now are sitting, waiting for your pick, the 9th pick in the 3rd round. 3 quarterbacks have gone. Now let's just assume quarterback 4 and 5 on your list are still available, and you're a bit of a panic because all of a sudden, they just took Russell Wilson in front of you. These 2 quarterbacks, Brady and Rodgers, went. And I'm going to panic. Now you need to relax for a second and say to yourself, oh, let me look at this matrix. Oh, 2 of the people around the loop have already got their quarterbacks. So the most likely at this point in the draft, highly likely, that only 1 quarterback will go, 0 or 1 will go to your next pick. So if I have 2 people, 2 quarterbacks, that I think either one I can get, I'm fine with, then I can wait on quarterback around the loop. If there is a hard level right here, and there's just 1 quarterback left that I like, and there's a significant drop-off in the level, then you better take that 1 quarterback. But let's assume you don't. Now you can sit here, and you can say, oh, both these teams, 2 of these 3 teams don't have a running back yet. So I may consider taking a running back here because a couple of running backs may go. Or because if you love a receiver, there's a level at receiver, you take the receiver. And then you come around in the fourth round, the 9th pick, you're probably going to have that quarterback, one of the 2 quarterbacks that's most likely there. So not sure what you call this, but using the draft board matrix in your commissioner tools is really beneficial. I'll give you one more example. Oops, I went the wrong way. So I call this counting players. And again, I'm 61 years old, so I need a co-manager to help me with this. It's kind of tricky, but it can really add value. You're in the 4th round. You're going to loop around to the 5th. That's going to be 16 players are going to go between this pick and the next pick. So if I could estimate, and I did have that estimate on the map, we do that. I forgot to mention that. But if I can sit here and estimate how many running backs, how many receivers, how many tight ends, how many quarterbacks are going to go in these next 16 picks, and then I could go down to my cheat sheet and not mark them out, but tick on them. If there's going to be 4 running backs, I go tick 4 more running backs down from the last running back taken. Sometimes it's tough when they're all over the place, but you can do that. And if you get a co-manager to do that, then you can sit there in your 90 seconds that you have to make your pick or whatever your timer is, and you can look down at those numbers and say, wow, there's a huge wide receiver level that's going to kill me here. So I'm going to take a wide receiver here. And so that kind of helps you break ties and gives you a better perspective. Not an easy thing to do because it takes a little time to do that. So having a co-manager to help you. But counting players is definitely something that will give you a little bit of an edge over your other managers. What have I got now? Postulate 6. So now we're getting into your emotions versus logic. And, you got to be cool. You got to keep your head. One of the things that is important is to keep a number of people in your queue, your go-to list. I like to have 3 or 4 in my queue when I get within 3 or 4 of my pick. So I feel safe that when it gets to my pick, if there is a run, I'll still have one guy in my queue that I can at least say I still got a guy that I had in my top queue, as opposed to having a run and getting sniped. And then all of a sudden your queue's gone and you're going, oh my gosh, where's my cheat sheet? What am I doing? 60 seconds. You don't want to get in that mode. You want to be cool. I don't know if you remember Jeff Ratcliffe yesterday, or was it yesterday, the day before? One of the things he said is you want to go into the draft and and it's like driving to the store to get some milk. You're doing it so smooth because you practice so much that it's just calm. You're calm and you know what you're doing. Even when you have situations that change, as we talked about, you still have practiced those and you're just cool about it. So you want to have a decent go-to list or your queue set up as you approach your pick so you don't run into that panic situation. And here's another one that's very similar to a postulate 5 is this happens to me. I think it happens to other people. You get in this tunnel vision and you've got let's say you got 4 queues there and your top queue is who you really like and you got 3 others and everybody's getting close to you, picks are coming and you start to get, oh God, he's going to be there. I think he's going to be there. And the next thing you know, all you can think about is this guy on the top of my queue is the best player left in the draft. And if I don't get him, my draft's torched and I'm so focused in on him and tunnel visioned in on him. And then somebody snipes me and poof, even though I got 3 guys on my queue, I'm emotionally a wreck. Don't worry. There's a statistical thing about the drafts, as you've probably all seen. I've had times where I've got sniped and I really had just in the situation and 4 weeks into the draft, that player that I lost didn't turn out that well. And the guy I got instead did well. You're drafting players and hoping that a certain percentage turn out. As we know, they don't all turn out that way. So try not to let that get to you. It's sometimes hard, but you got to let that go because you need to continue with your draft and keep your head. Another thing that people like to do, especially in local leagues when you're all sitting around a bar or sitting in somebody's house, is late in the draft, you're having fun, it's all exciting, and you decide you're going to take Dak Prescott because they got a Cowboy guy who's in your draft, and he's going to be so upset when you do that. Don't do that. Let somebody else be the funny guy in the draft because you want to focus on your team. Because what happens next is you're down to the last couple rounds, and you want to take, you got to get a kicker, you got to get a defense, and I wanted to take this receiver, and all of a sudden I realized I got 3 quarterbacks. I don't need 3 quarterbacks. I got Dak Prescott. Why did I do that? I should have taken this receiver. And then somebody else takes them, and you didn't have as good a draft. So don't play games. Be smart. Let's see what else we've got. Postulate 8 and 9. I like this one. This one's really fun. When you get into those situations in whatever round, mid-rounds or whatever, and you got that long turnaround, and you got 2 guys, and you're just thinking, I like this one, but I think he's going to last. I think he's going to last to the next round. So I'm gonna wait on him. I'm going to take the other guy. So what I like to do is, when you get those situations, you ask yourself, how upset am I going to be if that guy gets taken before my next pick? And if the answer is I'm going to be really upset at myself, not emotionally, but logically. Logically, I'm going to say, I was tried to be sneaky, and I tried to go an extra round, and he went. That guy was important. I'm going to be really mad at myself. All right, then you take him then. So you ask that question to yourself, and if the answer comes out, I'm really upset, it's time to take that player. It's a good sneaky way of trying to think ahead instead of thinking sneaky, nobody's going to take him. So that's a fun one to do every once in a while in the draft. Let's see. The next one is new faces, etc. Basically, this is a lot to do with the rookies where you've got the shiny new toy, and he comes into a team where he's a first-round pick. Let's take Corey Davis, for example. He was a 5th pick in the first round last year, going to Tennessee. And obviously we expect him to do lots of top draft pick. Everybody starts the group think. You hear people on the radio and et cetera. Corey Davis is going to be fantastic. And what about Rashad Matthews? He's an old man. He's not that good. And what happens is Corey Davis's ADP is way high. He's not that valuable. Let me say you got to pay for him to get him, even as a rookie who hasn't played. Where Rashad Matthews was the 18th receiver the year before in PPR. He's a middle receiver too, and everybody forgets about him. His value gets great because his ADP is low, and you can have great value. And turned out that last year, even though Corey Davis got hurt, sure enough, Rashad Matthews was the better performer as that old man. So something to think about. You got to get away from it and try and look, see through the group think and the shiny new toy. It's emotional. You try and break that emotion up and really think it out. Maybe he still is the guy you take, but don't get hyped up on that stuff. All right, 10. Talking about basically managing risks and taking chances. Take a leap of faith. Every once in a while, you've got to look at some guys, as we've talked today, and a lot of people came up with people like the Patrick Mahomes. As Dr. Rhoda said, he likes that guy as a starting running quarterback that you can get late. So as you analyze and do a lot of your work, maybe you decide that's the guy you want as your number one quarterback, and that's a leap of faith. So you're going to go down and find the ADP and wherever that is, maybe it's round 13, and you're going to not draft any other quarterbacks, and you're going to take that guy as your number one quarterback. And if it doesn't turn out, it may hurt you, but the quarterbacks are a limited position, so you may be able to get lucky with somebody else. But you have to decide to take some leap of faith. You can't just walk through the ADP in your draft, just going through and just taking, that's the next guy. No, you can't do that. You can do it, but you've got to take some chances because there will be differences. And if you can get the right differences, you're going to score big. Because if you can take that quarterback in the 13th round that you have decided, and that quarterback does pan out, then look how many people are, somebody way up at 7 or 8, you've been able to take a receiver, a running back, or a tight end, and your team's better. You're doing a lot better. Let's see. So don't be afraid to be different. Don't worry about groupthink. You've got to make some chances. You've got to decide who those people are, and you've got to just execute the way you want to execute. Last two things, keep your eyes open at all times, and don't forget your cheat sheet when you come to a draft. It's very important to have your cheat sheet. That is all I've got on the set of the drafts.
So let's just, before we get past this, leave that thing up. Leave it up with the blindfold.
All right.
Tell everybody what you were doing there.
Is it up there?
You'll have to reshare.
Oh, I got to reshare.
Just tell everyone what you were doing.
Oh, basically, it was the draft in Vegas, a $100,000 buy-in, and it was a 26-round best ball with 30-second picks, no cheat sheets. And so I practiced with my wife. I'd print out cheat sheets, practice. And I had 300 depth cheat sheets. Where are we at? Okay, we're good. And as she went through them, I was just sitting on the couch. I didn't have a board in front of me. I knew I didn't have a cheat sheet if she had it. And about halfway through about 3 weeks of practicing once or twice a day, I realized I don't even need to be seeing. I can have my eyes closed. So I brought a blindfold to the draft, and it was quite entertaining.
Yes, it was, and quite impressive as well. Have a couple questions, Emo.
All right, let's see what I can do.
How early is too early to take a big risk to get a guy that you really want to get? Is there such a thing? Mm-hmm. And are there any positions that are the best to take the bigger risks on for you?
Well, sometimes it kind of works out for you because typically the top 3 rounds of players, you're not going to have some crazy pick out there because most people understand that stuff. But so it every year it kind of changes. I remember back in 2015 when Allen Robinson was just coming out, and there was a chance he was going to have a good year. And I ADP wise, I thought I could get him in the 5th round. I think I had the 9th pick, and I was a 3rd round reversal. Definitely, if if we're talking about quarterbacks, you can get those guys so late, 4th, 15th, 14th. If you really got a guy, I remember Brad Cruz. He was stuck in a draft in Vegas, and he went down to the 15th round, and he took Matt Ryan. This was the year before, the year he had the big year after the change of coaching and after 1 year of it. And I'm looking at his draft. I was walking around, he's toast. Well, Matt Ryan ended up being the 5th quarterback rated that year, 5th quarterback fantasy-wise. So in quarterbacks, you can do it quite late, but I don't know if I'd suggest that. That was a little fortunate.
All right, one more here. In Stomp, you value specific player targets over tiers, right? There are certain guys you go into the draft that you want, and you'll maybe jump above that tier to grab them.
Yes, and like I was saying before, if you're on that 16 pick thing and you're sitting there and you've got a tier at receiver, and even though maybe you think he should be in a round or 2 later, and as we've talked with many people, sometimes you do have to jump a round or 2 a little early because you believe that's the next guy where it's going to fall off, and then maybe at the other position you can get somebody at 18 picks or 16 picks.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the Stomp I like this. This is I think a lot of us kind of do this intuitively. We have guys we like, we want to go after, but to have it laid out a little bit, very helpful. Yeah. Great segment there. Yeah, and you're going to be around in the chat, right? Just keep an eye on the chat.
Try and hang out in the chat.
All right, we're going to reset here. Thank you, Emil. It was fantastic, of course, and I'm sorry I missed the first couple minutes of it. Although I could hear you, you just couldn't see me. It was okay.
Sounds great. I hope I made sense.
All right, and just to reset, we're going to bring Gary Davenport in here momentarily to do the IDP. And look, you call and he answers, and there he is, Gary Davenport. You know him from Bleacher Report. You know him from Football Diehards. You know him from Roto World. You know him from Draft Sharks. You know him from everywhere because he is everywhere, and he does the IDP stuff, and he does it like nobody else. Gary Davenport, welcome to the Fantasy Football Summit, sir.
Oh, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Say my name 3 times, and I'll show up in your living room.
All right. IDP. All right, let's just throw the basics out there. And I think the people, based on the chat, most everyone knows, a little something about IDP. They're here to hear what you have to say. But just give the basic rundown, and then we'll start getting into some of the specifics, just the basic for those who aren't familiar.
Well, it's the same as the offensive players. It's just you have individual defensive players as opposed to a team defense. And what it does, it adds a little bit of relevance to the defensive side of the ball. I mean, you're not, as you've heard, I'm sure, several times over the last few days, team defenses are something you wait until late in the draft, you grab it just for the kicker, you move on with your life. It doesn't do a service to football.
No, of course not. And look, I didn't start playing IDP until the last few years, and now like Mike Dempsey and like Gary, it's not as fun to play less intensive and extensive formats. So when we come into an IDP draft, if someone's just jumping in, when do you start drafting these guys?
I wish there were a magic answer to that question, but there really is. I mean, I get it asked that more than any other question easily. There just isn't one. So much depends on your roster requirements and your scoring. If you're only playing one IDP at each position, a defensive lineman, a linebacker, a defensive back, then it's essentially team defenses, and you're going to wait until late. Now, if you've got, say, 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, 2 defensive backs, and a flex, it'll depend on the scoring. You could see the guys go anywhere from, say, round 3 or 4 to round 7 and 8 is when the first IDPs will come off the board. If you play in a format like we do in the Serious Dynasty League or in Deathmatch, where individual defensive players will score as highly as the top offensive guys, then you're talking about a legitimate first-round pick. So you need to look at the scoring and see where the top defensive players come in relative to the offensive guys. If you're starting the same number of linebackers as you are wide receivers, and a top linebacker is scoring like a wide receiver 2, then you know roughly that when the wide receiver 2s are coming off the board, that's when you should see the high-end linebackers go. And if you're not comfortable with setting the pace on the defensive side of the ball, you can wait and let other owners in your league do that. Let the truly elite guys, the Joey Bosa's and the Luke Kuechlys and the Landon Collins of the world will come off the board. You'll see a couple more guys go. You know that's where you should start drafting your ID. You're still going to have a competitive lineup, and you won't have to worry so much about, did I grab this guy 2 rounds too early, which there's no such thing.
And to know your scoring. Talk about,
oh my goodness. Every year I see it happen. I see it happen with guys that I know.
You see me do it.
Yes, in IDP leagues every year, and it's not any kind of knock on the owners, but I think some of us, we've been in so many leagues that when draft time rolls around, we have several going on all at once, and we don't look at the scoring, and it can have such a huge impact on player values, even more so with IDPs. So take a minute. See not only how the IDPs stack up against one another, but also how they stack up against the offensive players. Do your homework.
Do your homework, yes, and especially if you're in the deathmatch league. We'll just go ahead and cop to that right away. Position by position. Let's start with defensive linemen. What's the goal there? What are we looking to do?
If there's one word that I would attach to the defensive line, it's probably scarcity. If you're starting 2 of those and your league is 12 teams, you look at the top 50 defensive linemen, you run out of dependable weekly starters before you run out of starting slots in that league. It's better than it was. We saw a couple guys get positional eligibility back this year, Khalil Mack, Chandler Jones, but it's easily the shallowest pool of talent among the 3 IDP positions. So I like to be aggressive when I'm drafting my defensive lineman. I'm dang sure want to have one top 10 guy that I know I can just plug in every week. And more often than not, I'll try to get 2 top 15 guys. I don't want to have to worry too much about my defensive line.
And what about J.J. Watt? Is he still a breed unto himself?
If he's healthy, I have a man crush on J.J. Watt that is unrivaled among football fans in the United States of America. If I had a son, I would consider naming him Justin. I'm not even kidding. And if he's 100%, he's put up seasons that are just, I think there were 2 years in a row in the Serious Dynasty League. He wasn't just the top scoring defensive player. He was the top scoring player overall. I mean, my team just rode him to the playoffs. But we're talking 2 lost seasons and serious injuries. The back issue. I mean, how many players have you seen come back from multiple back surgeries? And then the next year, he finally starts rounding back into shape. And the words they used in an article I read a few weeks ago was his meniscus exploded. That's not 2 words I want to hear together with a guy who's going to be a very early IDP pick. There's not much of a discount available with J.J. Watt. So he's the defensive equivalent of Rob Gronkowski a couple of years back when he was still in round 1 consideration, but you knew if you drafted him that it was a huge roll of the dice.
And so talk about some of your undervalued guys at the defensive line and a little bit, get a little bit into the difference, what we're looking at in the difference between the defensive ends, the pass rushers, and the interior guys.
In a perfect world, you want a defensive end who is not just a high sack guy, but also who puts up decent tackle numbers. A 2-way defensive end, a guy who can set the edge against the run and get after the quarterback. Now, those are it's easier said than done to get those guys. There aren't very many of them. The defensive tackles, they're essentially 2 breeds. You're going to get your pass rushers like Geno Atkins, who generally aren't going to have great tackle production, or you have higher tackle guys like Damon Harrison. And there it's all about risk versus reward. I mean, if you're okay with a donut every 3-4 weeks out of a tackle, get the sack guy. He's got a much better chance of putting up a big score. If you're a little risk averse and you want a more consistent guy, go with a guy like Damon Harrison. Undervalued guys, I like Everson Griffin this year. I'm seeing Danielle Hunter go a lot before him. And while I like Danielle Hunter too, I just think Griffin's a better value. Robert Quinn's back at defensive end this year in Miami, and that's a guy who had a couple great years playing with his hand in the dirt. For where you can get him in drafts, I've got a lot of shares of him. Same thing with Mo Wilkerson. I'm expecting a bounce back year. Well, maybe expecting is not the word. Hoping for a bounce back year in Green Bay out of him and seeing him return to kind of his 2015 form when I think he had 12 sacks. Akeem Hicks is a source of cheap production. I don't understand why Akeem Hicks consistently goes as late in drafts as he does, given that he can give you a decent combination of tackle production and sacks. He's never going to be probably a 10-sack guy, but he's what Calais Campbell was in Arizona. He's going to get you 50, 60, 65 tackles and mix in 7 to 9 sacks. That's good production. You're getting top 15 numbers probably out of a guy who's going to be available outside the top 20 in most drafts.
And let's move on then to the linebacking corpse, as they say in the talk about how are we approaching linebackers in general?
Well, they're the foundation of your most IDP lineups. They're the highest scorers more often than not. They're the most consistent scorers. So you build around those linebackers. Of my first 5 IDP picks, it's almost always going to be 2 defensive linemen and 3 linebackers. Maybe it'll be a linebacker with that first one, and then I'll come back and get a defensive lineman, maybe the other way around. But think of them like running backs. You can never have too many dependable linebackers on your team because even if you can't start them every week, people are going to come looking for them.
Right, and I guess we're going to have some specific questions here too, but I kind of like to get a little more through some of the theory on this, and talk about who are the rock solid guys and who are some of the risky guys that you're worried about at the position.
Well, you're rock solid. I mean, Luke Kuechly, Dion Jones, and I can't believe I'm blanking on the number 2 guy, CJ Mosley. Although there's somebody else I'm forgetting, I apologize for that. Those guys are all set and forget. You're going to have to pay retail to get them, but they will absolutely anchor. And most of the top 10, you can't go wrong right now, except maybe Roquan Smith was in my top 10 until the last couple days. And with this news about his contract dispute with Chicago and why they're having a dispute, if he's not in camp pretty soon, I'm going to get nervous. Some of the guys that usually I wind up shying away from are guys that are fantastic NFL players that just their stats have fallen off. Levante David is a phenomenal linebacker. But since Quan Alexander really came into his own, I don't know if it's a matter of scheme and they're having Levante David play more pass coverage, or if it's a matter of Alexander just siphoning some of those opportunities away from him. But we just haven't seen Levante David's production stay as consistently excellent as it used to be. And it's the same thing with Eric Kendricks in Minnesota. Eric Kendricks is a prisoner of the fact that the Vikings are so good defensively.
All right, and I know you talked about some of the undervalued guys here, but there's some questions from the crowd I want to get through before we get too far to this. One question: what's the view of Oren Burke as a deep sleeper? And when he says deep, he means 32-team league deep. He asked this question, and the reason I'm getting it is because somebody I know just drafted him in the league. So yeah, go ahead on Owen Burke.
He is what he is. He's a deep sleeper, but there is some upside there. And if you're playing in a league that deep, 32 teams, I mean, Sirius Dino is only half that big. And if I think a guy has half a pulse, I'm going to add him at this time of year. This is the time. Fall is coming soon, so every good squirrel should be out getting as many nuts as he can. A couple of them will be rotten. That's just how it goes.
It happens. And one more here, just a general an assessment of the Cowboys' front seven since we've been through the defensive line and the linebackers.
Oh, DeMarcus Lawrence is a top 5 defensive lineman. He'll be great. Sean Lee is Sean Lee. When he's healthy, he can put up numbers as good as anybody else. When he's healthy has also been quite a caveat throughout his career. He's done better of late, to be fair. Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith are an interesting twosome in that I would assume both are going to start, and I know a lot of people are drafting Vander Esch as though he's nailed down that second nickel job, but I don't know that that's quite that determined yet. So until it is, Vander Esch is going to be a risky play. And the rest of the Dallas defensive line is a lot of talent and even more trouble. You've got Randy Gregory, David Irving. Irving's going to miss 4 games. Randy Gregory's been reinstated, but it's only a matter of time until that bell gets rung again. So outside Lawrence, there's not a lot that I would touch outside of if you're talking those deeper 32-teamish leagues.
There's a guy we talk about every single year, it seems like, Mark Barron.
Yeah, Mark Barron is great chief linebacker this year. I get that he's undersized for the linebacker position, and his numbers weren't phenomenal last year, but someone is going to have to make tackles for the Los Angeles Rams. Everybody talks about how fantastic the defensive line is in LA, and rightly so. You got Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh. That's a pretty good foundation. But the linebackers are a bit of a question mark. It looks Barron's locked in. Looks like Corey Littleton will be the other inside linebacker, and if that's the case, both those guys are available later in drafts and are going to outproduce their draft slot this year.
And you are listening to the Gary Davenport from Bleacher Report and IDP Sharks and the other 1,000 places that hammer him over the head to get his work. You can't turn on your interwebs without Gary popping up. So here's your favorite position, your favorite thing. Well, we'll start with cornerbacks, but we're going to get into the secondaries. The simple advice on cornerbacks is
that wait even longer than you do on defensive backs. Defensive backs, the pool of talent is the Marianas Trench. There's tons of them. There are going to be guys who will wind up in the top 20 this year that no one is talking about right now. There might be one in the top 10. This time last year, Jordan Poyer and Kevin Byard, their mothers weren't beating the IDP drum for them at this point last year. So there's no reason not to wait. Landon Collins, Rashad Jones, Keanu Neal, those are great defensive backs, and they are absolutely going to put up big numbers for you. But for what they cost, I would rather fortify my linebackers, fortify my defensive backs, and just bang away late in the secondary on upside guys. And if they don't pan out, I haven't lost anything because I didn't invest anything. And I kick them to the waiver wire and grab one of those guys that's going to be there. Even in leagues as deep as Sirius, I can be 6 weeks into the season, and I'll bet you I can find a defensive back I can plug in on the waiver wire.
And you can, but there are some undervalued guys, right? There are some people that maybe we should look for when everyone else is looking at flashier names.
Yeah, the later Bradley McDougald in Seattle is a perfect example of a value defensive back this year, given all the turmoil and tribulation, or whatever word I'm trying to say. There you go. That's the one. Double word score again. In Seattle, especially in the secondary, I mean, Cam Chancellor is already gone. Earl Thomas has 1 foot out the door. The tackle opportunity, someone's going to have to make tackles in that secondary, and Bradley McDougald has shown from his time in Tampa Bay that he can be that guy. Justin Evans in Tampa is another one. I'm expecting big things from that young man in year 2, and he's an afterthought in most drafts. You can get him as late as you want.
Okay, so we've kind of run through the positions. Now I get to have my way with you. And just some of the things, and yes. And so some of the, one of the things I'm always interested in on the offensive side of the ball is the coaching changes. And so are there any changes this year to scheme that are going to have a particular impact on players of note?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Arizona go to the 4-3, which, like I said, opened up positional eligibility for Chandler Jones. And it's going to be interesting to see how that 4-3 is relative to the 3-4 that we saw from the Cardinals the past several years. Was one of the most aggressive defenses in the NFL. And if they pull some of that aggressiveness back, it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the player values. The Colts 4-3 isn't as big an impact in IDP, if only because there's no one on the Colts defense who's that good. I mean, I don't mean to be rude.
Not that good. It happens.
In Detroit, I honestly don't. Matt Patricia, I'm very interested to see the Lions in the preseason a couple times, because Matt Patricia has been known for a lot of multiple looks and lining guys up wherever. It makes me a little nervous about Ziggy Ansah until we see more of them on the field. I would hate to see, an 11th hour positional switch and see him lose his defensive lineman eligibility the 3rd week in August after I've already drafted.
Ziggy might zaggy. And that brings up another point. Are there any positional changes that we need to be aware of going into the season that maybe flew under the radar, or just guys that you have an eye on that are going to either benefit or not?
Like I said, it helped most of the scheme changes we saw really helped the defensive line depth. It's still shallower than the other 2 positions, but it's significantly better in 2018 than it was even in 2017. In addition to the big names like Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, Chandler Jones. Wow, I'm just doing phenomenally here. We saw guys like Marcus Golden in Arizona and Alex Okafor in New Orleans also gained defensive end eligibility. And while those aren't the biggest names and they've had some issues staying healthy, those are the kind of guys I'll take a stab at late on the defensive front, is say a 4th or 5th defensive lineman if you need that many, if you're playing in a league that has a deep enough bench to roster that many, because there's some potential there, but it isn't going to cost me anything. And that's late in drafts on IDPs. Go just shoot for upside. Don't chase, 35-year-old defensive ends who haven't had more than 3 sacks in the last 2 or 3 years. It's not worth it. Just like on offense, I'm all ceiling late in drafts.
Yeah, late in the draft, I would agree with that. A lot of talk here in the chat about Alex Ogletree. Go.
I'm an Ogletree fan this year in New York. He's certainly the best linebacker the Giants have had on paper, inside, in a long time. And last year wasn't great, but the year before he was fantastic in LA. He's got the range. He has everything you want in a linebacker. So I think he's going to be fine. I have him inside my top 10. It's also going to be very interesting to see what he does to Landon Collins' value, because part of the reason Landon Collins racked up such big tackle numbers is that the linebackers playing in front of him weren't especially good. And it's where you'll see several NFL teams. It's something to keep in mind when you're targeting defensive backs, is look for that defensive back that's playing behind a group of linebackers that's not fantastic. Matthias Farley is a guy that comes to mind in Indianapolis this year that could benefit from kind of subpar linebacker play. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Landon Collins' numbers dip a little bit. He's still my number 1 DB this year, but the margin has narrowed.
I will not tell him you said that the margin is narrowed. He would not take it kindly. Okay, the rookies, the question is now the rookies, the Denzel Ward, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Derwin James. Derwin James, did he maybe go to the best possible place of these guys. But who do you, and beyond that, how does that shake out for you?
Well, Derwin James is my top rookie defensive back this year, but I don't know about perfect destination. It's Los Angeles, so he's probably going to get hit by a bus in 3 days.
It's true. Well, just don't hang out with the tight ends.
Yeah, that is no lie. Minkah Fitzpatrick, I'm not crazy about his role in the short term, if only because Rashad Jones is entrenched as the box safety there. I think we could see Minkah Fitzpatrick play more box moving. I think Rashad Jones' days in Miami are numbered, so I like Fitzpatrick more in dynasties. And in theory, Denzel Ward is a great rookie corner rule candidate. You want a guy who's young, who other teams are not going to be afraid to throw at. I don't know that Denzel Ward is going to inspire the kind of intimidation in quarterbacks that Marshawn Lattimore did so early as a rookie. So I would even go a little bit deeper down that list. Find a nice third or fourth round rookie who has managed to work his way into the starting lineup for an NFL team. There's your rookie corner rule guy.
That seems reasonable. So I don't like to do this to you, but it's been asked. Assess your own Cleveland Browns defense. Remember, everybody, he likes the Cleveland Browns. He's in the area, so he's kind of a fan. This is going to get ugly.
On paper, it looks decent, mostly. I mean, Myles Garrett, if he can stay healthy, showed me quite a bit last year. I do not frown upon the fact that the Browns took him number 1 overall, which says a lot. And Emmanuel Ogbah, in his own right, is a decent, strong-side defensive end. I don't know that he's going to go to multiple Pro Bowls, but it wouldn't surprise me if he made it to 1. The linebackers, I don't know at this point. Picking up Michael Kendricks kind of threw a monkey wrench into everything. I mean, they've got 4 decent linebackers. They've just only got 3 spots. So from an IDP perspective right now, drafting a Chris Kirksey or a Joe Schobert brings with it additional risk right now. I don't know. I know the Browns were lining up Michael Kendricks as a weak side linebacker in base sets early in training camp, but is it going to stay that way? Are they in a fight for 2 starters? Are they going to rotate them and just kill everyone's value? The secondary, I like the cornerbacks they added in the draft. TJ Carey is a guy who I wound up picking up in season in a lot of IDP leagues last year who stuck around. And with me, a cornerback is only as good as the score he put up the Sunday before. So they have a very short leash. So for him to stay on my roster for 6-7 weeks says something about the kind of numbers he put up. And at safety, I'm glad they added Demarius Randall. My mom told me if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. So where Jabril Peppers is concerned.
All right. So here's something I want to go ahead and ask. This is something Bobby is asking if there are any some of the stats we discussed on offense, like targets and snaps, and if there's anything like that we look at when we're evaluating IDPs. I'll let you get into that, but I want to start you out by pointing you in, my favorite direction. It's the scoring. It's the individual stadiums and how the press box handles the scoring in terms of tackles and assists.
Oh, absolutely. It varies widely from city to city. And there are some cities who year after year are generous in awarding tackles and assists, and other cities that award way too many assists and not enough solo tackles, and others that fall in the middle. Buffalo, if you look at a guy across just with a stern expression, maybe growl at him a little bit in Buffalo, they'll give you an assist. In Cincinnati, for the most part, they've never heard of a solo tackle, so it's assist, 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 assist. And you'll wind up with linebackers with a stat line of, say, 3 solos and 11 assists, which can hurt their production quite a bit. In St. Louis, it's not as bad in Los Angeles as these past couple of years, which I find very interesting because I was wondering when the Rams made the move from St. Louis to L.A., would the scorekeepers kind of follow with the team? If they did, they've changed how they're doing it because it used to be the Rams, you couldn't buy an assisted tackle. It wasn't, you were either getting a solo or you weren't getting anything. If 4 guys simultaneously jumped on the ball carrier, they would pick one, and that guy got the solo. And it has a huge impact on IDP value. Your NFC East teams are generous. NFC West, Seattle's a good spot, but they used to be assist heavy too. Not as bad last year. We saw Bobby Wagner put up 97 solos. It could be
Blaze on Fire has been paying attention. Is Buffalo home scoring still the cheat code?
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's it's hard not to love Tremaine Edmonds, and he was my 1B among rookie linebackers before the Roquan Smith silliness. And at this point, I got to bump Edmonds up above him. And I love Roquan Smith. I don't know what the Bears are thinking.
And a little talk about defensive tackles in particular, worries about Aaron Donald, and just any sleepers at the position or any undervalued guys that you're looking at specifically, under the radar guys, I should say.
Oh, if Aaron Donald has defensive tackle eligibility in your league, then he's still the number one guy, but that grip might be loosening a little, if only because the two sides appear entrenched in regards to whether or not he's going to get the money he's looking for now or later. And the Rams didn't help their position any, I don't think, by turning around and handing Brandon Cooks and Todd Gurley pulling a truck full of money up to their house as Aaron Donald's sitting there like, oh, fellas. The defensive tackle position, sleepers, it's hard at tackle to find a sleeper. There are essentially 5 or 6 defensive tackles that I trust in a DT required league. And then I'm just going to start banging away at 3 techniques and hope that maybe I hit the jackpot. Sheldon Richardson in Minnesota is a guy that could vastly outperform his production this year, given the guys he's playing on the line with. I mean, right now he's being drafted after Linval Joseph, who's Minnesota's other tackle. And they've got Everson Griffin and Daniel Hunter on the ends. I mean, that line it might be more loaded than Jacksonville now, and that's saying a lot.
Everyone's into Shaquem Griffin for the obvious reason. In addition, Seattle, that defense is not, there seems to be opportunity there. Is there any reason to be excited about Shaquem Griffin?
Moving forward, yes. I don't know so much about 2018. An awful lot would have to fall into place awfully quickly. And I saw the interception today in practice too, and I'm as big a Shaquem Griffin fan as any. It's fantastic what that young man is doing already. But they've got KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner. So I think even if Griffin were to work his way into the starting lineup as a rookie, I don't know that they're going to hand the keys to nickel snaps to him over KJ Wright right now. That said, you're seeing these older, high-priced veterans in Seattle kind of get the, thanks for everything. Here's a nice gold watch, and see ya. So sooner rather than later, I think you could see Griffin as a 3-down line. He could be a legit 3-down NFL linebacker and a solid IDP option.
Dynasty guy, you're drafting and holding then.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, that's good. So a couple more here, but we're running out of the hour again. I want to thank everyone who's here tonight and has been here throughout, and I'll get to that in a minute. But Gary, you can follow him on Twitter at IDP Sharks. Do it now if you haven't already done it, and I think everyone in here does. I do think Bobby made an interesting point. The NFL doesn't regulate the differences. Why do you think that is in the scoring? Is it, they're out there trying to figure out what a catch is. They put a lot of time and energy into figuring out a lot of things, like where a helmet goes. And I'm going to ask you about that as well. But why no thought into making more consistency? Any thoughts on that?
Easy answer, they're dumb. I don't know. For the life of me, I don't understand why they wouldn't make tackles an official stat. And, okay, they're not just dumb. They're dumb and cheap. And this way they tell the teams, hire your stat crew, and you pay them, you worry about it, and that'll be that. If they had official stat crews, then, they'd have to pay them like officials, and then they would only make $39 billion instead of $39.2 billion. And then what are they going to do? The vinyl seats in their private jets? What kind of life is that?
I love those. I don't know if you've looked this far forward at the strength of schedules and what defenses or defensive players in particular have great playoff schedules. Anything? Are you that far ahead yet?
I've never been a huge fan of looking that far ahead, if only because strength of schedule at this point, it just doesn't mean anything. So much changes in the NFL from year to year that by the end of the season, we'll be looking at what was supposed to be the 3rd hardest schedule this year and being like, this is what's hard.
I hear you. Helmet rule. I know none of us know because the players don't know. How concerned are you about this in terms of some of these players that we draft at linebacker? They're a little aggressive, it turns out. Probably how they got their job. And now we're asking them to be unaggressive in certain ways. Can this be coached up? Is it something that's going to create a ton of problems for us as IDP players?
It's completely backwards that they're trying to start it at the highest level of the sport as opposed to starting at youth football and coaching kids to do this that way all the way through. So by the time they make it to the NFL, they know what they're doing. It's what's holding up the Roquan Smith deal is they want all that language that says they could take away his guaranteed money if he gets ejected for violating a rule that no one really knows what the rule is at the moment.
Thanks, Danny Trevathan.
And that was unfortunate what happened to Devontae Adams, but that wasn't a dirty hit. I don't even know that Trevathan necessarily dropped it. A lot of times, these guys are moving a million miles an hour. They both kind of come down and together.
Right. It's easy for us to see the slow motion and think, that's evil. And it's really just football.
Yeah, and honestly, I think this is going to be worse than the targeting rule in college football, and I did not think that was possible.
It seems like it's impossible. All right, there's one more question from Dave Cherney. Let's get it in. Talking about looking for value. I know you talked about Landon Collins, but value at the Giants defensive backs.
Oh, the Giants defensive backs. Darian Stewart's not a terrible option, and he's not going to cost you anything, maybe a bye week guy, but there's just not. Janoris Jenkins, maybe 3 years ago, was a guy that I would look at the cornerback position, but I think there are a lot of other guys you can do. That said, if the Giants were playing a very favorable matchup against a pass-heavy team, I am a huge proponent of streaming at the cornerback position unless I can fall into a guy like TJ Carey last year who just puts up solid numbers every week. Other than that, I play matchups. And in that regard, I would take a cornerback from any team. I might even roll a Brown out there. Maybe.
And this is why I will chase Gary Davenport to the lengths of the earth to find out this great information, especially before the death match begins. If you don't know about that league, you should look into it. It's horrifying. Gary, thank you very much for the time, for the information, and for all the information you're going to give me throughout the rest of the season.
Oh, pleasure was mine. I'm glad to be a part of this. It was awesome.
It was great having you. All right, everybody. That's going to do it for night 3. We're going to shut it down. Thanks to Evan Tarciano from FootballDiehards.com. Thanks to Dr. Roto from Scout Fantasy, Hussein the Brain from Fantasy Couch, Brandon Marianne Lee for fighting through the technical difficulties to give us her pragmatic stats from Fantasy Alarm. Find her there. Emil Cadlick, a presentation of the night on the Stomp strategy. Loved it. And, of course, Gary with the IDPs. We'll be back tomorrow night. We're going to go kind of DFS heavy, and we're going to have Armando Marsal, Casey Joyner, Bobby Gomez, DraftKings Millionaire Maker winner. Armando again with more DFS. Jen Ryan with DFS and gambling. And Jeff Mans is going to close out the night with some Guru Elite DFS strategies. Then on Wednesday night, we're going to do a best ball draft live and analyze it as we go through it. So I just want to thank all of you for being here. I hope we've got you taken care of in terms of questions. Follow everybody on Twitter. Hit me on Twitter if you have any further issues or need any more information about what's going on. And Gary will be drafting, as he reminded me. He's never shy. So, again, thanks a lot, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here. Remember, if you want to watch the replays, if you missed part of this, we have you can go out and you can purchase unlimited replays. It's basically you buy the library, very reasonable price. Check my Twitter feed and check the Facebook feed, and I'm going to put a promo code in there so you can get a discount on that. And really appreciate you being there. Unless Emo, you can put that in the chat now. I don't know if you can or not. So, but check my Facebook feed or my Twitter feed for sure for that at Football Diehard. We'll see y'all tomorrow night, same time, 8:30 Eastern. Until then, take care.